So, the young me, wow. As a kid, I was a tomboy. I was always a competitive athlete. In my teen years, I was in beauty pageants, and I was Miss New York Teenager. The Army always attracted me. And then in college, I decided to join Army or ROTC.
Chris is thriving in college. There's only one drawback.
Mount St. Mary was almost, at that time, almost all women.
Just 9 miles south on the banks of the Hudson River is another college. This one, almost all men.
West Point United States Military Academy is the place where serious cadets go to become career or professional officers.
On Halloween night in 1985, Chris and her girlfriends make an impromptu visit.
We went trick-or-treating in the barracks at West Point. You know, we weren't supposed to be there, but here we were, and Jim was the cadet company commander, and I had dressed up as a baby, and so I had a baby bottle and a blanket. Jim was sitting at his desk studying, trying to ignore what was going on around him. You could tell he was so uncomfortable having this group of giggling girls, and they're all dressed up in goofy costumes. I remember going over and just talking to him. I was like, wow, this is really, this guy, you know, this guy really has his stuff together. I made chocolate chip cookies, and Jim made a point of returning the tin to me. And he said, you know, they were the best chocolate chip cookies I ever had. And they say, you know, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I guess that might have been true a little bit, so. We met at the beginning of my junior year, the beginning of his senior year, and by the end of the year, you know, we just both knew that this is somebody we want to spend the rest of our lives with. You know, he was the epitome of duty, honor, country. That's something you want to be around. I mean, that's the kind of person you want to trust and build a life with. Someone that you can trust. His father was a general, and he was stationed in the Pentagon. Lieutenant General James Houston Johnson. They were known sort of as Fort Bragg airborne royalty.
After graduation, Jim continues officers training, while Chris goes to ROTC Airborne School.
At that time, not a lot of women went through airborne school, and I was the only woman in my chalk. At the final graduation jump, he pinned my wings on, and the wings he gave me were the ones his father pinned onto him when he graduated from airborne school. You know, I just thought that that was really special. The day after that, it was a weekend, and I remember him saying, I'm gonna fix us a nice breakfast. The table was set for breakfast, and there was a bouquet of a dozen roses. And he got down on one knee and put the ring on me and asked me to marry him. So it was very romantic and very sweet. We got married on May 17th, 1987. I remember friends saying, I've never seen someone walk down the aisle so confident. Just felt so right.
When they come out of the church, they have the saber bearers who form an arch.
Two people in the front put the sabers down and cross and say, you know, you can only pass with a kiss. So of course the bride and groom have to kiss in front of everybody.
Right from the beginning, Chris understood that, you know, Jim would be in command, but Chris would be the commander's wife. Chris embraced that.
Chris puts her own military career on hold, and she and Jim raise 2 children while moving from base to base.
I got involved in the community, you know, learned the skill of being an Army wife, and supported the career.
Army team couples is what we would call them. When they work well together, there's a halo effect.
We were a really awesome team, and they were building him to take on more advanced senior leadership roles.
Truly a great day to be here at Fort Benning, the home of the infantry.
Yeah, we had a happy marriage and happy family. We had a great life.
Jim's career is on the rise, at a time when the U.S. military needs more good leaders.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
He deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd. They were a rapid deployment force. Jim got promoted to lieutenant colonel during that time. He came home the following year in 2003, was home for about 3 months, but he'd been selected to command a battalion. They were 101st Airborne Division in Iraq.
This will be a campaign unlike any other in history. A campaign characterized by shock, by surprise, and by the application of overwhelming force.
The children and I moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky by ourselves because he had already left to go to Iraq. And in September 2005, he deployed again as a battalion commander. And I had concerns that he would be burnt out.
After being apart for almost 4 years, Jim finally returns home. It should be a happy reunion, but something's not right. He's cold and distant, even with his own children.
Jim changed during that deployment. Walking back from the soccer field for one of our children's games, he would just divert off and come back and show up 30 minutes later. Nothing I did was pleasing him. Nothing I did was good enough. All of a sudden, he's not initiating sex at all. So this is when the suspicion starts coming up. Something's not right. He's withdrawing from me. Intimacy is on a decline. What is up?
But then they receive the best possible news.
Jim was selected to command the 173rd Airborne Brigade in Italy, probably the most sought-after infantry brigade command in the United States Army.
We were very excited about it because we were all moving to Europe as a family.
In the summer of 2008, the family relocates to an idyllic residence in Vicenza.
We're finally all together in Europe, and it just didn't feel right. He started getting angry, and I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells around him. I'll never forget one day, too, during that time, he just looked at me and said, "Is this all there is?" Here, we'd worked so hard as a team to get to this, and it was hurtful.
By the end of the year, the relationship is even more strained.
Jim was always engaged with our family. We would do silly things like watch American Idol and all vote together, and he just didn't want to do those things. December 2008 was one of the most miserable Christmases I've ever had. Yeah. So many things weren't making sense. He was insistent that we were going to do a New Year's Eve party. I was worn out and thought, let's just enjoy the holidays as a family. We know you're going to deploy again next year. He said, oh, by the way, we're going to have this Iraqi family join us for this New Year's Eve weekend. And they were going to stay in the house with us.
Jim explains that he became acquainted with the Al-Attar family during his 2 tours in Iraq.
And that he said, there are interpreters. You understand that, right?
There's multiple interpreters at every level inside of a brigade operation. They are part of that same close-knit network for whom you would do almost anything.
I found out he's going to drive to the Netherlands and pick up this family 6 hours up, 6 hours back. And he doesn't have a vehicle big enough to fit them. So he's going to take a vehicle, a van, out of the motor pool, the brigade motor pool, a government-owned vehicle. And he's going to use it for personal reasons. That is a huge no-no. You don't do that. He'd never be that kind of guy that would do that. He didn't lie, cheat, or steal. My gut kept saying something was off. And I couldn't put my finger on it.
Jim arrives home with his friends and presents Aladdin Al-Attar, his wife Shrek, and their 24-year-old daughter, Haveen.
I remember the father had a heavy mustache. The mother was kind of your frumpy housewife. And her daughter, she had long, dark hair, wore very dark makeup, and she had a young child.
For the first few moments, it seems like this could be a happy New Year's weekend after all. Until Jim does something subtle, Something only Chris, his wife of 20 years, would find shocking.
He scooped down and picked up the 14-month-old, and the child didn't flinch. Jim wasn't somebody that held other people's children, never scooped up a friend's child. It was woman's intuition. And right then and there, I realized that there's something about this family that's just not right. There was something going on here.
Chris is only about to discover the reason for her husband's distance.
In a very, very tiny community locked inside of Italy, there is a patent place of the highest order. There's no secrets.
Jim had gone against everything that the Army and West Point had taught him.
He's doing way worse. He's self-destructing. And little did I know, it was just the very beginning.
He destroyed his family, destroyed his name. He lost everything.
Colonel Jim Johnson is acting completely out of character at the family's New Year's dinner, especially with his interpreter's 24-year-old daughter, Haveen.
I remember not being able to eat. Everything about this is off. They had their own little private corner down on the end of the table. Haveen had a digital camera in her hands, and Jim was messing with it. And it was the same camera I had been given for Christmas. And he had given her one too, exact thing. I really didn't know how to process it. You're just ingesting it and trying to take the next breath. Keep your composure, don't fall apart in front of these people. That night, and I asked him if, he was having an affair with her. And he said, no, her family would kill her or disown her. Not, I don't feel that way about her. And then I asked him, well, have you kissed her? And he said, yes, but not passionately. What the hell does that mean?
That weekend, Jim tells Chris he wants to take the Alatars shopping at the Army PX.
One of my children said, oh, yeah, we had to wait for Haveen to make her grand entrance down the stairs because we were all sitting around just waiting for her. And she was upstairs doing I don't know what. Haveen is going to get shoes for the baby. And at one point, Jim's like, oh, I'm going to go over here. You take Haveen up to the register and pay for what she wants. So she's got these shoes. And on the way to the register, she finds a cute little sweater for herself. She picks out shampoo and other things for herself, just loading up on whatever product she's looking for. And I'm like floored. The mother, she would go outside and smoke cigarettes. During that whole weekend, she would go out and smoke a cigarette and leave the butt on the ground. Who does that? I ended up cleaning 12 cigarette butts off the ground when they left.
When Jim makes the overnight trip to take the Alatars back to the Netherlands, Chris is left alone to wonder how much trouble her relationship is in.
But I didn't want to believe that he was having sex with her. I still didn't want to believe it. I went into his office when I opened the top drawer, and I saw a notepad, and he had written 3 columns: divorce now, divorce in 6 months, divorce a year from now. And he had plotted out which would be most advantageous to him. I just remember when I found that note, feeling like the blood had drained from my face. That weekend I not only cooked, but I remember running a load of laundry for them. I did. My husband's mistress's laundry. Jim got home and I said, I found a note in your desk today. And I said, are you divorcing me? And he looked at me shocked. He said, well, I'm sorry you saw that. No. And then he said, well, is that what you want? I said, no, I don't want a divorce. I want us to work things out.
When you have an affair in the military, if it's discovered, it normally doesn't turn out well for you in your career, which is why there's always denial, which is why you double down on denial.
Jim denies the affair, but Chris remains dubious.
I knew that the child, Haveen's daughter, could not have been Jim's. He had a vasectomy in June 2000. I think she was born in like November 2007. It's not his child. I kept looking. And I don't know if I was still trying to look for something to prove myself wrong or just prove myself right. Well, I finally did. He has a black book, and in the back, he had all these secret email accounts. And that opened up, at that point, 3 years of emails that he had been communicating with Haveen. And some of them were so juvenile. Like, reading them were embarrassing. It was like he was a teenager, a horny teenager, literally. One of the emails she wrote to him was like, "I'm your little shaitan." It means devil in Arabic. That, yeah, I mean, you're a little shaitan, I'm gonna make trouble all your life. Kissy, kissy. As the emails progressed between them, I started realizing certain things he was saying with her that corresponded with events in our life. Like him taking money out of one of our personal accounts. He had taken $10,000 and converted it to euro and gave it to her. My legs started shaking. I couldn't stop it. And I thought, screw this, I'm calling him. Woke him up and screamed in the phone, "Are you her?" He can't deny he's having an affair. And of course he said, "You're recording this call. Someone's listening in." He wouldn't answer the question. It then led to me insisting that we go to counseling to see the family life chaplain in Vicenza, because I was not about to give up. I was not going to throw the towel in. I thought, I'm going to fight for my marriage. Unfortunately, there's a fair amount of adultery in the Army. Chaplains are there to help preserve marriages. The chaplain gave us this book, and the book was about adultery. I don't even remember the name of the book. I hated it. It just made me so angry. One page said, "The person having the affair, it's not your fault." And he just grasped onto that. Like, look, it's not all my fault. It's your fault too that I'm doing this. You know, it allowed Jim to give himself permission to continue to blame me for his actions, which is insane.
If you're a psychologist, this is standard transference. It's transference of blame to somebody else so that you can feel good about yourself, and you build this case, and you actually begin to believe it.
Of course, now I look back and he lied even to this chaplain during our counseling. Not only did he not stop the affair, he continued it and got even more deeply involved. A credit card receipt from his work credit card came to our mail, and I opened it up, and there was charges on there that didn't make sense. He was using his government credit card for her VoIP account so they could communicate. He did not stop at all. So then I'm starting to walk around with this big, deep, dark secret. Because if word got out that he was having an affair, his career's over. You know, the Army doesn't tolerate adultery. And so I had this burden now. I'm like, now what do I do with this? You know, I'd invested everything in him. You know, our family was invested. Our children had sacrificed for him to do what his country called him to do. I believed in it. Our children believed in it.
Chris has a very strong sense of right and wrong, very strong morals.
Jim was about to go down to combat with these guys again. I thought that the disruption of having your commander taken out, I did not want to cause a disruption in the brigade. And I knew I had to dig up whatever strength I had to handle this with as much grace as I could and to protect Jim, protect him from himself at this point.
Despite the betrayal, Chris continues to put Jim's needs first. And so does Jim.
Jim called early November, you know, how soon can you be ready for a trip? I was like, well, where am I going? And he said, I've gotten a plane ticket for you and you're going to leave Italy. The only way I can fix our marriage is for you not to be there when I come home. I want you gone. I didn't know at that point what he was capable of.
He knows how to plan, he knows how to execute, he knows how to do war gaming, action, reaction, counter-reaction. Revenge becomes very, very powerful.
reported, I'm Colonel Jim Johnson, commander of the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, stationed in...
Chris Johnson's husband is wielding his powers as an Army colonel to force her from their home in Vicenza, Italy.
In a normal press conference format.
He's kicking me out. Jim had also said on the phone call, I'm revoking your command sponsorship, which means I'm not allowed to stay in Europe as a family member. I'm gone. I can't stay.
It is very unique to see the brigade commander's wife return unless they choose to go home. Very, very odd.
I remember shaking. There was something in the tone of Jim's voice that scared me.
Jim is not only pushing Chris out, he's demanding she leave their children behind.
I didn't know at that point what he was capable of. He's the only Army brigade commander in all of Italy. No one questions you.
There was no way Chris would leave her children in a foreign country and come back to the States without them. No way.
I decided for my safety and my children's safety, we're just gonna leave. So I ran over to the school and withdrew the children. And then I got one-way plane tickets to leave Italy. I fled. I felt like I fled Italy. And I remember landing in JFK, meeting my parents, getting in the car. And I just remember looking out the window and thinking, now what? Now what do I do? I don't have a job. I have no money. I have nothing. Now what?
5 days later, Jim tracks Chris down at her parents' home.
Kept trying to call. He was calling my parents, and finally I just decided, okay, I'll answer the phone and tell him, stop harassing my mom and dad. I'm here. Our children are safe. My children were very angry with him because they knew about the affair. They met her. I mean, they spent a weekend with this woman that they knew their father was involved with.
Over the next 2 months, the battle over custody intensifies.
He had tried 2 emergency injunctions out of a court in Florida to get emergency custody, and were both denied. There was no cause for it.
In response, Jim initiates an obscure legal maneuver called the Hague Petition.
My understanding of the Hague Petition, he was claiming Chris had kidnapped the child and taken the child back to the United States against Jim's wishes, orders, permission.
Jim is desperate for custody.
He knows how to plan, he knows how to execute, he knows how to do wargaming, action, reaction, counter-reaction. Revenge becomes very, very powerful.
Chris is further stunned when she gets news from Vicenza.
By the end of December, I got a phone call from my neighbor, and she said, Chris, there's been a young woman with a child seen coming and going from your quarters in Vicenza. He had moved his mistress into our house with her kid.
Relationships with foreign nationals are always scrutinized. You're not allowed to have a foreign relationship without reporting that up through your security clearance. It is a security issue.
He just let her roll right in and sleep on my pillow and eat off my dishes. She was just gonna roll in and take the place of Chris Johnson. And it was at that point I realized no one's gonna stop him. He's blatant about the fact that he's having an affair.
Jim had gone against everything that the Army and West Point had taught him beyond the point of no return.
That's when I realized, okay, I need to do something. And I thought, that's it. I've got to let the commanding general know. It was a moral decision for me to just sit back and not say anything. How do you look yourself in the mirror? I sat at my parents' computer. I typed like 5 pages, and I disclosed the email accounts that Jim had, the email accounts that Haveen had that I knew she used to communicate with him, the dates that I knew he had been with her, the misuse of government resources, the cell phone, the government credit card, like all the things I knew about.
After receiving Chris's letter, the Army immediately starts an administrative investigation, known as a 15-6.
By February, the 15-6 then rolled into a criminal investigation.
Meanwhile, The battle over the Hague petition escalates.
Jim's contention was that I was kicked off post because I was a disruption. He and his father both wrote affidavits saying that I was this disruption on the Army post, and that's why I was kicked off post, and that I was ordered to leave our children behind. But he was just trying to find anything to make my life hell. Jim called once and said, I'm gonna send U.S. Marshals to the house and, you're gonna get arrested. And that lasted for about 2 months. I mean, it was scary because who deals with a Hague? I'm being, accused of kidnapping our children and across international borders. And, it was 2 months of hell. It was amazing feeling when the judge ruled in my favor. My attorneys cried, I cried. I mean, they were so relieved. Stress will do terrible things to your body. I started getting sick, like a pain, abdominal pain, and found out ultimately that I had a pre-malignant tumor the size of a grapefruit on the tail of my pancreas. I had surgery December of 2011, and it was a much more complicated surgery than they had anticipated, and I ended up in the hospital for a week. I got a phone call from the hospital the day after I came home, and they said, well, we've just tried putting your claim into the military health insurance, and they've denied it. You're not covered. You owe us $100,000.
It was devastating. It's not like she had a lot of money.
As a military spouse, Chris should be fully covered.
I couldn't drive. I was still on meds. I was still, stitches and, still kind of a mess. And so my sister drove me to the ID card office on West Point. And I, sat down with a woman and handed her my ID card, and she pulled up the information on the computer and said, oh, well, you're divorced. I said, no, I'm not. She goes, yeah, on September 23rd, you got divorced. So they go and shred my ID card, and I just lose it. I just start crying. I'm not divorced. But they knew immediately something fishy was up.
West Point's ID card office notifies the Army's Criminal Investigation Division.
They had alerted Army CID. Because of all that, that's when the Army decided to do a preliminary look to investigate.
I get a phone call from Paul Danley, and he introduces himself as the lead CID agent investigating my husband. And he says, here's what we found out. Jim filed divorce registration. I'm going to scan a copy to you, and I want you to look at it. Your signature's on it. Can you tell me if you've ever seen it before?
That's when everything started to blow up, actually. And it appeared that the divorce decree, or whatever it was called, looked like it was just a copy of a marriage license from when he and Chris got married in New York, with some things changed.
Basically, he created his own certificate of divorce registration. But he forged my signature, made up a signature of clerk in Monroe, and signed his name.
He filed that with the military. Again, that's a crime.
He said, oh, and by the way, Jim and Haveen got married. On November 9th, they got married.
I couldn't believe that Colonel Johnson would do this. Fake a divorce decree, and then marry Haveen while he's still married to Chris Johnson.
My husband had committed bigamy. Bigamy. Every time I turned around, I thought, now what?
And then all of a sudden, we're getting calls from Vicenza saying, hey, you need to come here. They found a lot more information than what was in Chris Johnson's letter.
Colonel Jim Johnson, who was once committed to duty, honor, and country, has broken his oath in a startling way.
I mean, he committed bigamy. I remember just saying, I can't make this up. One of my children sent their dad an email later, and all it said was, how was the wedding? Was there cake?
It turns out that Jim has been on the radar of CID investigator Paul Danley for some time.
The whole thing started with a contract fraud investigation over in Afghanistan. The contracting office had alerted Army CID because there was a Colonel Johnson, that was raising a ruckus because his contractor wasn't getting paid. They were fairly low-level contracts. This is for cultural support services. They can understand why Colonel Johnson was berating them for not paying this contract when they had other, bigger issues going on. Water, feeding the troops, etc. And they said it was so bad that, it raised red flags. We thought the investigation was done, and out of the blue, Chris contacted me.
Chris provides the missing piece of the puzzle. The fact that the contractor in question is Jim's mistress's dad, Aladdin Alatar.
Why are you dating the contractor's daughter when you're paying her father? That's a big red flag.
So you got an Iraqi man advising on culture in Afghanistan. Apples, oranges, just didn't make sense.
Aladdin Alatar was actually living in The Hague in the Netherlands. He knew nothing about Afghanistan. So it raised just a lot of questions about why this contract was even signed.
Paul asks Chris to provide anything else she can. Emails, credit card statements, travel records.
They started putting the pieces together. So then when I said, by the way, he was also exchanging bank account information with Aladdin, they realized that there was way more to it. He was having an inappropriate relationship, among other things, fraud, misuse of government resources, the whole 9 yards.
Then we discovered that Colonel Johnson had given a phone to the Alatars, a government phone, I should say. And one of the bills came back, I think it was over $30,000 for a month, just for 1 month of cell phone usage.
But there's more. Investigators going through Jim's computer hard drive uncover questionable financial deals worth millions.
They'd found that Colonel Johnson had tried to have a almost $10 million contract let for windmills. The whole contract was spun up as being a way to get water to troops in remote posts, that they'd be able to produce their own water. So when I talked to the company rep for this windmill company, he explained that they wouldn't work in Afghanistan. Someone was trying to push through a contract, almost $10 million for these windmills that wouldn't work. Why are we doing this?
The money trail leads back to Jim and to Havin's father.
Aladdin Alatar had supposedly found these, or was working for this Dutch company that developed the windmills. If this contract had been signed, Aladdin would have got approximately $500,000 as a finder's fee. So that's a big flag. You get the same contractor, you're dating his daughter, and all of a sudden, he's gonna get $500,000.
Chris's information makes it possible for the Army to build a solid case on Jim's financial misdeeds. They also find blatant proof of Jim's adultery.
Jim and Haveen made a sex tape, and he kept it on his government computer. They found it on his hard drive.
The greatest disgrace is where and when the tryst was recorded.
He was in Iraq and not in Afghanistan with his brigade. His brigade just went off to war. He's supposed to be leading his soldiers, and instead he's screwing around with his mistress. He's not a leader.
Army investigators have learned all they need to know about Jim Johnson. They're ready to prosecute. Jim is arraigned on a total of 27 charges, with a maximum possible sentence of 54 years.
The charges range from adultery, bigamy, fraud, misuse of government resources, and conduct unbecoming of an officer.
The Army flies Chris to Germany to attend a trial her email helped trigger, and which could cost Jim and her everything.
When you're married, as long as I was, to Jim, upon a divorce, you are eligible for up to half of the service member's military retirement. But if Jim's criminal behavior led to him being dismissed or incarcerated, those benefits would have been taken from him, and so then half of nothing would be nothing for me.
Jim's not going to be the only one that's going to be punished. Chris and the children are going to be punished as well.
Made my stomach churn.
Jim Johnson has not been shut down. Even in the midst of a court-martial, he's about to show his own family how destructive he can be.
Jim was going out of his way to do anything he could to cause Chris and their children pain.
It was just unbelievable. I was so hurt. I just blown away, numb.
I think it's horrible. I think that's the worst of it all.
On June 12, 2012, disgraced Army Colonel Jim Johnson gets his day in court, and Chris is there to watch over the proceedings every step of the way.
I remember at one time him looking at me, just, if he could kill me with his eyes, he would have, because I'm the one that blew the whistle.
The original list of 27 charges has come down to 2 counts of conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman by the time the trial starts.
He pled guilty to 15 charges. He had to plead guilty to adultery because they had a videotape of it.
I testified during the trial, testified for a couple days at least.
The prosecution presents an irrefutable case, thanks in part to the evidence Chris has provided them.
It seemed like the panel was getting close to, not only convicting him, but, giving him a sentence, involving some incarceration or maybe a dishonorable discharge from the military.
Jim's attorneys now put anyone willing to testify in defense of Jim on the stand, including Jim's father.
His father said, "My son is an honest man. My son's an honorable man. He's not a liar. My son's not a criminal." Dude, your son is a criminal. He just pled guilty to 15 charges, and now you're up on the witness stand saying, "My son's not a criminal." Really?
Both sides rest their case. It takes the jury only a few hours to reach their decision. Jim Johnson is convicted on 2 counts of conduct unbecoming of an officer. The Army pronounces his behavior to be of a nature to bring discredit upon the armed forces.
What happened to the guy that, embodied duty on our country? What happened to the man that, doesn't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do?
Jim's sentencing hearing is one last chance to acknowledge the pain he's caused. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he uses the opportunity to plead with the court not to send him to jail, so he can care for his beloved Haveen.
He was talking about, allowing him to go back and save her and keep her from being deported. He also made a comment, he's like, "Haveen and her daughter are the center of my life." And one of my children behind me heard that and just started sobbing. Our children used to be the center of his life. His family, us, was the center of his life.
He destroyed the relationship with his children. He chose to do that. It's just, it's so sad.
5 years confinement or pay a $300,000 fine. That was his sentence. His father wrote a check for $300,000 and paid the fine. He could have gotten up to 54 years in prison. Instead, he walked out of the courtroom as a colonel with eagles still on his shoulders. Justice wasn't served.
Jim should have gone to jail for what he did, but if he did go to jail, Chris and the children it would have been catastrophic for them.
Chris does finally divorce Jim Johnson, for real this time.
From what I understand, he's still with Haveen and her daughter. We have no communication. Our children are essentially estranged from him.
Chris and her kids get half of Jim's pension and benefits. She knows not everyone is as lucky.
There's no whistleblower protection for spouses. So you tolerate illegal and immoral behavior where you turn them in and you risk losing everything. And that's what led me into working on some legislation.
Chris amazes me. She fought for herself and she fought for her children, and now she's fighting for other families.
What we ultimately created was called the Family Served II Military Justice Reform Act. And what that would allow is if a service member commits misconduct, it allows the service to properly punish the lawbreaker without financial repercussions on the family. The benefits that the families also earn are protected. So that'll be my swan song from the Army. That'll be the last kind of move I do to help take care of families. I'm at peace where I'm at now, and I hope my story gives other spouses hope. You know, you can rebuild. You can have a happy, successful life after going through something so painful. You know, it's just nice to know that someone else who's dealt with it and has gotten through the tunnel towards the light and life is good again.
Seattle, autumn 1979. The rain is thin, needling the asphalt, turning the city into a blur of sodium light and wet glass. On a side street in Rainier Valley, a pale blue Chevy Nova idles at the curb, driver's door half open, headlights cutting an empty slice into the fog. Radio still on, murmuring a late-night news broadcast about inflation and overseas conflict. Inside the car, a purse on the passenger seat, a denim jacket folded with care, a half-finished cup of coffee gone cold. The keys are still in the ignition, but the driver is gone. Her name is Emily Carter, 19. Community college student, part-time waitress at a 24-hour diner off Rainier Avenue, photography nerd with a second-hand camera always hanging from her neck, the kind of girl who develops her own pictures in a makeshift darkroom in the bathroom at home, the kind of girl who circles concerts in the newspaper and never has enough money for tickets, but loves to dream. Tonight, she clocked out of her shift at 11:42 p.m., told her coworker she was just tired, that she'd drive straight home. She never made it. A jogger is the first to see it. He slows down when he notices the open door, the empty driver's seat, the ghostly breath of the exhaust and cold air. He calls the police from a payphone on the corner. One of those calls that starts calm, confused, and ends with a creeping panic he can't explain. Because everything looks wrong, but nothing looks broken. Patrol cars arrive. Blue and red strobes bounce off wet pavement and closed storefronts. Officers lean into the car, check the glove compartment, the floor, the back seat. No sign of struggle, no blood, no broken glass, just absence, the kind of absence that makes your skin crawl. They run the plate, call the registered owner. A father's sleepy voice turns into a terrified one in the space of 6 seconds. He says Emily left work less than an hour ago. He says she should be home by now. He says that's my daughter's car. And the officer can hear something collapsing on the other end of the line. Within the hour, a missing person report is filed. An address is logged. A description is read out loud and typed up. 5'4", brown hair, hazel eyes. Last seen wearing a Navy diner uniform and white sneakers. Standard procedure, standard paperwork, standard night in a city that thinks it has seen everything. But there's something in the air that says this is not standard, not tonight. Detectives are called in, grumbling about the hour, about the rain, about another probable runaway that will stroll home by morning. They walk around the car, flashlights sweeping the gutter, the sidewalk, the nearby alley, a cigarette butt, a smudge on the handle, faint shoe prints already dissolving in the drizzle. They bag what they can, note what they can't, make quiet calculations about time and distance and likelihood. Seattle sleeps. Emily doesn't come home. By dawn, the story is already writing itself. A mother at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, staring at the door as if staring hard enough might make it open. A father on the phone calling anyone he can think of, friends, relatives, the diner, the hospital. Over and over the same question. Have you seen her? Over and over the same answer, no. A patrol car cruises slowly past the Carter home, more for show than for substance. A neighbor peeks between curtains, sees the uniforms, feels that familiar prickle of dread. It doesn't take much for whisper networks to ignite. By the time the morning shift starts at the diner, the roomer is already there, waiting at the counter like a regular. Something happened to Emily. They found her car. She's missing. On local radio, the newsreader's voice breaks in between songs with a short bulletin. Seattle police are looking for a 19-year-old woman last seen leaving her workplace late last night. It's 30 seconds, maybe less. Enough to plant a seed in the mind of every listener stuck in traffic under a gray sky. Another girl, another night. Another street that looks just like the one they drove down yesterday. No one knows it yet, but what happened to Emily Carter will not be just another missing person case. It will be the headline that refuses to die, the story that keeps coming back every few years, older, paler, colder. Tonight, it's just a car with an open door, an empty seat, and rain soaking into a uniform that should have been hanging on a bedroom chair by now. Tonight, it's just a family that hasn't slept yet. Decades later, they will look back at this exact moment, this stretch of curb in the early hours of a wet Seattle morning, and call it the beginning. The beginning of a cold case, the beginning of an obsession, the beginning of a question that officially will be labeled solved, but never really answered. Right now, it's simpler. A girl is missing, the city is waking up, and somewhere out there in the darkness, someone knows why. Morning light doesn't make it better, it just makes everything sharper. The blue Chevy is now taped off, a bright yellow ribbon slicing the street in half, daring anyone to cross. Neighbors huddle in doorways, pretending not to stare, pretending they're just on their way to work. Reporters haven't arrived yet, that comes later. For now, it's just uniforms, detectives, and the quiet hum of a crime scene that might not be a crime scene at all. Not yet. Not officially. Detective Mark Holloway stands at the edge of the tape, coffee in hand, coat collar turned up against the drizzle. He's been with Seattle PD long enough to know the difference between drama and danger. The car bothers him, not because of what's there, but because of what isn't. No broken glass, no dragged skid marks, no chaos. It looks like someone paused life mid-frame and never hit play again. He ducks under the tape, leans into the driver's seat. The smell of cheap coffee and diner grease clings to the upholstery. He sees the purse, wallet inside, cash still there, tips from the night shift folded into a rubber band. Lives don't usually vanish without their money or their ID, not the ones who are leaving on purpose. He asks for the last person who saw her. That leads him straight to the diner. The Rainier Diner is a cliche that doesn't know it's a cliche yet. Neon sign buzzing over a chrome-framed door, laminated menus, sugar packets in chipped ceramic jars. At a corner booth, two waitresses who work the late shift sit together, faces pale beneath smeared eyeliner. A manager keeps wiping the same section of counter over and over. Everything smells like coffee and fear. Holloway listens. Emily clocked out. She joked about smelling like French fries. She said she had an early class the next morning. No, she didn't mention meeting anyone. No, she didn't look upset. Yes, there was that one guy at the counter who talked too much, but he was irregular, always harmless. No, they don't know his last name. Yes, they think they would recognize him again. Maybe. Cold case, the phrase doesn't exist yet, not the way it will later, in big font documentaries and late-night reruns. Right now, it's just a new file in a metal cabinet. A missing person investigation. Days pass. Posters go up. Emily's face, frozen in a school photo, starts appearing on telephone poles and supermarket boards. Her parents go on local TV, sitting under two bright studio lights, answering questions that all sound the same. Did she have enemies? No. Was she in trouble? No. Did she ever talk about running away? No. The mother's hands twist in her lap. The father stares somewhere past the camera like he's looking for a different reality just behind the lens. Tips begin to pour in. Sightings. Always sightings. Someone thinks they saw her at a gas station off I-5. Someone swears she was in line at a movie theater, buying a ticket for a horror film. A man calls from Tacoma, says a girl who looked just like her tried to hitchhike near the port. Every call is logged. Every detail is written down. Patrol cars circle. Nothing. Holloway keeps coming back to the car, to the way it sits on that street like it drove itself there and gave up. He walks the blocks around it, talks to night shift workers, insomniacs, the man at the all-night grocery who sees everyone eventually. No one is sure. Nobody wants to be wrong. One woman remembers a van, maybe blue, or green, or gray. It was late, it was raining. People forget between the raindrops. One small thing stands out. A kid who lives 2 houses down from where the car was found says he heard something around midnight. Not a scream, not a crash. A car door slamming. Twice. Fast. Then what sounded like a voice. Low and sharp. And then nothing. Silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. It's not enough. Not for a warrant, not for an arrest, not even for a solid suspect list. It's a piece, floating on its own, waiting for others to lock on to. Days widen into weeks. The posters fade a little in the rain. People keep living. They laugh in bars, complain about traffic, go to the movies, argue about the Mariners. But in the Carter house, time doesn't move. It loops. It starts every morning at the moment the phone didn't ring, the moment the door didn't open, and ends every night with a mother on the couch pretending she's only fallen asleep with the lamp on, not afraid of the dark. Someone calls the tip line with a strange claim. They heard that a girl from the diner was taken by a man who works down at the docks. Someone else whispers about a married cop who used to drink coffee at the counter and flirted too long, too often. Paranoia takes the wheel. Every man who ever sat alone on a bar stool becomes suspicious. Every regular in the diner is now a lead. Holloway doesn't have the luxury of paranoia. He has procedure. He has reports to file, shift rotations, other cases, burglaries, assaults. A city that doesn't care that his gut keeps dragging him back to a 19-year-old who vanished like a cut scene. He keeps the case alive as best he can. Follow-ups, quiet interviews, a name scribbled in the corner of a notebook. When a coworker mentions someone who gives them a bad feeling, the file gets thicker, the answers don't. Then the first real crack of something else, something stranger. 2 weeks in, the Carter family gets a phone call. The line is static-filled, the voice low and distorted like the caller's covering the receiver. 3 words, that's all. She didn't suffer. Click Police trace the call as far as they can. A payphone near Pioneer Square. No cameras, no witnesses who remember anything beyond some guy on the phone, I think. It could be a cruel prank. It could be the killer. It could be someone who wants attention. None of that changes the chill that sinks into the marrow of everyone who reads the report. The phone call is logged, transcribed, and placed in the file. 3 words on a page that will sit there for decades. Words that look like comfort but feel like a threat. Seattle starts to move on, but it never completely does. Not from something like this. Year's End brings more rain, more fog, and fewer headlines. The serial killers that make national news are somewhere else, with names that will become shorthand for evil. Seattle has its own shadows, but it also has a way of swallowing things whole. Cases slip into back pages, faces blur on notice boards, life pushes forward, one paycheck, one game, one election at a time. Emily's case lingers, but quietly. The detectives work a rotation of bad nights and worse mornings. Nobody has unlimited time for a girl who might have run away, might have started a new life, might have done anything except vanish without a trace. The absence of a body becomes its own enemy. Without that, everything is theory. Then an envelope arrives. It's plain, no return address, dropped in a downtown mailbox. The post office sorts it with a million other lives being delivered, and somehow it finds its way into the slot of the Carter family home. Mrs. Carter opens it at the kitchen table between unpaid bills and grocery coupons. One photograph slides out. No letter, no explanation. Just a Polaroid, colors slightly off, the frame a little crooked, the world trapped in that small square. The image is grainy, taken at night. A stretch of waterfront, wood planks slick with moisture. A pier, maybe. A railing. In the background, a cluster of lights, probably the city, smeared and distant. What grabs her is the figure, slight, blurred off to the left, as if whoever took the picture snapped it in a hurry. The outline of a young woman, dark hair, shoulders hunched as if against wind or fear. The face is turned away, or maybe the exposure was wrong. It's impossible to tell. But a mother doesn't need clarity. She just needs shape. To her, it looks like Emily. Police are called. Again, Holloway stands in the same kitchen where he stood the morning after the disappearance, staring at a different kind of emptiness. He holds the Polaroid with gloved hands. The sound of the plastic peeling away from its paper back echoes in the quiet room. "Could this be your daughter?" he asks, already knowing the answer. "Yes," the mother says. "No," the father says. They look at each other. There it is. The split, the line between hope and horror. The photo goes straight to the lab. Limited technology, limited answers. They can't pull out more detail than the camera gave them. They can't zoom into infinity like the movies. All they can say is waterfront, likely local, the wood grain, the type of railing, the pattern of the distant lights. They match several piers along Elliott Bay and the Ship Canal. It's like someone circled the city on a map and said somewhere here. The postmark is no better. Seattle. No specific branch. No handwriting to analyze because there's no message. The detectives canvass the waterfront. They show the blurred photo to fishers, to night shift security, to bored clerks who run graveyard shifts in bait shops and snack stands. No one recognizes the scene definitively. Everyone has a theory. It's Pier 57. No Shill's Hole. No, somewhere near Magnolia. The city begins to look like the photograph, familiar but nonspecific, close but out of reach. The detectives add the photo to the case file. Another piece. Another weight in a box that is starting to feel heavier than its contents. Anonymous tips spike again. People love a mystery, especially one that comes with a prop. A neighbor swears they saw a stranger dropping something into the Carter mailbox the night before, but when pressed, the description turns into fog. A coat, a hat, maybe glasses. Another caller claims the Polaroid looks just like a spot where they used to meet their ex for secret dates, and maybe that ex knows something. Maybe, always maybe. Meanwhile, other cases demand attention, bodies that are actually there, evidence that actually points somewhere. The city is not short on crime. Resources shift like tides. More urgent files land on top of Emily's. The Polaroid slides deeper into the stack. At home, it does something else. It rewinds hope. If there's a photo, maybe she's alive. Maybe she was forced to pose. Maybe she escaped. Maybe the person who sent it is trying to help. Or maybe they're laughing. Maybe they're keeping score. Every theory is a blade, and the Carters live in a house full of open knives. The call from the payphone, the photo in the mail, the empty car, they form a pattern, but it's smoke. Holloway keeps the file on his desk longer than he should. He circles the same names over and over. The chatty diner regular, the married cop, the dock worker, the ex-boyfriend who seemed just a little too indifferent. Everyone fits. No one fits. Then something else happens. Another girl vanishes. Not from the same neighborhood, not from the same background, but close enough in age, close enough in circumstance to ring alarm bells. Seattle police don't like the word serial. Not yet. Not unless they have to. Serial means panic. Serial means press conferences and public fear and reporters camped outside the precinct doors. Still, inside the squad room, the whispers start. What if it's the same guy? What if whoever took Emily is still out there, hunting? What if the Polaroid wasn't just a taunt, but a promise? They compare files, timelines, maps dotted with pins, red and blue and yellow. Two disappearances now sit side by side in the middle of a cluttered board. Some connections are tempting. Late-night young women, last seen near major roads. Other details clash. One girl had a history of running off. One did not. One car was found abandoned. One was not. The only honest conclusion is the one nobody wants. They don't know. Time moves anyway. The 80s arrive with brighter colors, bigger hair, and the quiet burial of old cases under new paperwork. Detectives retire. New ones come in, inheriting boxes with names they've never heard, and photos of people frozen at ages they've long outgrown, if they're even still alive. Emily's case becomes one of those boxes, stored on a metal shelf in the records room, labeled in black marker, Carter Emily, MP791142. Inside, reports, interviews, Polaroid, phone log, copies of missing person flyers that nobody looks at anymore. Officially, the file is open. Technically, the investigation continues. In reality, it waits for a new lead, for a new technology, for someone to care enough to pull it down, blow off the dust, and ask, what did we miss? For now, the answer is simple. Everything. By the time the 90s roll around, Seattle is changing. Grunge echoes from basement venues, coffee shops multiply on every corner. The skyline starts to bristle with cranes. The city is growing up, fast, and it's easy to imagine that the past is fading under fresh paint and new construction. But some things don't fade, they just relocate, from active memory into quiet corners. In a small house south of downtown, the Carters have learned how to perform a kind of normal. They host family dinners, they send Christmas cards, they talk about the weather, the neighbors, the rising cost of everything. They do not, if they can help it, talk about Emily, not in public, not in detail. Her room is no longer a shrine, but it's not anyone else's either. The bed is made, the closet door is shut, the camera she loved sits on a shelf, its strapped stiff with age. Every so often there's a ripple. A TV show runs a segment on unsolved disappearances. A newspaper does a Where Are They Now feature on cold cases. One of those segments includes Emily's face, her school photo, now retro in its hairstyle and shirt collar. The anchor says her name and what happened or didn't happen and asks the audience, if you know anything, call the number on your screen. Someone always calls. Most of the time it goes nowhere. Overheard barroom confessions that evaporate when checked, dreams mistaken for memories, people who confuse one missing girl with another because there have been so many. But once in a while, something drops that feels different. In 1993, a woman calls from out of state. She says she lived in Seattle in the late 70s. She says she used to go to a waterfront bar where a man liked to talk about the dark side of the docks. He told stories he shouldn't know in too much detail. One night, drunk and boasting, he said something that stuck with her for years. Sometimes people just fall off the map. You'd be amazed what the water hides. When she sees Emily's face on TV, the memory slams back. The timing is right. The location, close. She called then, she insists, back in 79 or maybe 80. She doesn't remember who answered. She doesn't know what they did with her tip. She doesn't know the man's name anymore, just his laugh, just his eyes. Records show nothing. No note, no report. Maybe the call was lost. Maybe it was logged under another case. Maybe it was dismissed as a drunk looking for a moment of importance. A box of miscellaneous tips sits in a corner of the archive, its contents a chaotic mix of hearsay, gossip, and memory. It would take days to sift through, and no one has days to spare. The woman's new statement is taken seriously, but it doesn't anchor to anything solid. No name, no address, just another ghost. Then, almost 20 years after Emily's car was found idling on that quiet street, the city makes a decision that will change everything. A new unit is formed, Cold Case. It sounds cinematic even then. A team of detectives tasked with reopening the files that time forgot. Old murders, long-term missing persons, cases that never got their ending. The idea sells well at press conferences. It also lands like a small tremor in the records room. Boxes are pulled down, files are reviewed, lists are made. One afternoon, Detective Sarah Lynn, a fresh face to the unit, precise, relentless, slides a file from the shelf and flips it open. She sees a 19-year-old girl in a faded school photo. A car on a damp street, the words, "She didn't suffer," scrawled in a phone transcript, the Polaroid, the pier, the anonymous tips, the dead ends. She doesn't know it yet, but this file will own her for the next decade. She starts small, inventory. What's here, what's missing, what was done and what wasn't. In margins of old reports, she sees notes from Holloway, now long retired, little lines of doubt, tiny flags he planted and never had time to chase. She reads everything, twice, 3 times, and she thinks one thing over and over. This should have been solved. Not because it's easy, it isn't. No body, no confession, no clear suspect, but because someone cared, because there were leads, because it was never entirely cold, just left in the shade. The world in 1999 looks nothing like 1979. There are new tools, new databases, new ways to decode the smallest trace left on a cigarette butt or a car seat. The science has moved on without the case. Now for the first time, they can meet. Sarah flags the case for forensic review. Evidence is pulled from storage, carefully, nervously, like relics. The envelope that once held the Polaroid, the cigarette butt from near the car, fibers lifted from the seat, a hair caught in the door frame. The lab techs look at the packaging. This is old, one of them says, half worried that decades have eaten everything they need to work with. But they start anyway. DNA is the new language of guilt. In 1979, it was science fiction. Now it's a tool, blunt sometimes, but powerful. The potential is intoxicating. A profile, a match, a name. Sarah allows herself a small, dangerous thought. What if the case doesn't have to be a question anymore? She doesn't know that every answer comes with a price. She doesn't know that solved can be just another kind of lie. Not yet. All she knows is that somewhere in these old envelopes and faded photographs is a night in 1979 that never ended. And she's going to drag it, screaming, into the present. The lab is fluorescent white and humming with machines that sound like distant insects. Plastic racks, labeled vials, the quiet concentration of people who are used to being the last hope in someone else's story. For them, Emily is not a face or a car or a family grieving in a house that smells like old coffee. She is a case number, an evidence set, a challenge. They start with the cigarette butt. It was collected near the driver's side door back in 1979, bagged, tagged, sealed. Back then it was just a maybe. Maybe it belonged to the person who took her. Maybe it was just litter. Now it becomes a potential key. The tech extracts what's left of the DNA from the filter. Time has not been kind, but it's not a total loss. A partial profile emerges, frayed, incomplete, but real. They compare it against what's in the system. Nothing, no direct hit. Whoever smoked that cigarette either never got caught for anything serious enough to warrant a DNA sample, or their profile simply isn't in the database. Next, the hair. One strand, caught in a door seal, root intact. That root is everything. It means there's a chance at nuclear DNA, the kind that can draw a clear line from one person to another. More careful extraction, more quiet waiting, another partial profile overlapping with the one from the cigarette, confirming this isn't noise. It's someone, the same someone, present at the car on the night Emily vanished, or close enough to it that the timing matters. They add the new profile to the national index, still nothing, no match. The databases remain silent. Sarah doesn't see this as defeat. She sees it as a starting line. There's another layer now. Genetic genealogy. The method is controversial, powerful, and still new enough to feel like science fiction. Take an unknown genetic profile, look for distant relatives in commercial or public DNA databases, and work backwards through family trees until the net tightens around a suspect. It's not police work the way old-timers recognize it. It isn't legwork and informants and stakeouts. It's family trees and probability. It's statistics and persistence. It's a different kind of obsession. For now, there are legal walls, departmental policies, ethical debates. The Carter case sits at the edge of that frontier. An unsolved disappearance from a time when no one imagined their spit might one day testify against their children. Sarah pushes, she writes memos, she attends meetings. She uses words like breakthrough and closure and long-term impact. She doesn't say what she's really thinking. I owe this girl a name to put next to whatever happened to her. Years tick by inside the case. Outside, life accelerates. The internet shrinks distances. Social media gives everyone a megaphone. Old cases find new audiences in online forums, message boards, amateur sleuth communities. People trade theories like baseball cards, poring over scanned clippings and grainy photographs. Emily's face appears there too. Someone finds an old article, posts it under the heading, Seattle 1979, girl vanished, car left running. Anyone know more? Comments stack up. Some are thoughtful, some are wild. A few claim insider knowledge, most of which falls apart under scrutiny. But buried among the noise is something that catches Sarah's eye. A user writes that their uncle used to work the docks in the late 70s, that he once told a story after too many beers about a girl they never found and a car that just kept running in the rain. The details are too close to ignore. The username is anonymous, but the IP trace leads to a small town in Oregon near the coast. It's thin, but so is the cigarette butt, so is the hair. Sarah traces the digital breadcrumb to a real person. A young woman, mid-20s, who's startled when a detective calls her about something she wrote online at 2 in the morning months ago. She apologizes, says she exaggerates sometimes, that she never thought anyone would take it seriously. But when pressed, she gives a name. Her uncle, a quiet, withdrawn man who hates talking about the past, who worked in Seattle at the port in 1979, who left abruptly in 1980 with no explanation, who gets angry when the news runs stories about missing girls. A name, an address, a new pin on Sarah's map. It's not proof, not yet. It's not even probable cause, but it's direction. She digs employment records, old union logs, arrest reports. The man, let's call him Raymond Cole because the real name doesn't matter here as much as what he stands for, has a file of his own, minor scrapes, a bar fight, a disorderly conduct charge, nothing that screams killer. But the timeline fits, the location fits, the quiet move away fits. She sends his name to the lab with a simple question: do we have any of his DNA on file? The answer comes back, no. But that's not the end, not in the world they live in now. Sarah knows that if she can't get his DNA directly, she might get it sideways, a relative, a cousin, a sibling, someone who uploaded their results to a genealogy site because they thought it'd be fun to find out if they were part Scandinavian. Behind office doors, conversations happen. Legal clearances, agreements, carefully worded requests, and slowly, piece by piece, a family tree begins to emerge. At the top, a couple who had 3 sons. Each son had children of their own. Some of those children, curious about their roots, sent their saliva off in a tube and waited for an email. The fragments of their genetic codes now sit in distant servers. The unknown profile from the cigarette and the hair, that partial aging echo from 1979, starts to find matches. Third cousins, once removed relatives. Not enough to name a specific person yet, but enough to circle a family. Enough to put a spotlight over the surname Cole. One branch of the tree leads inevitably to Raymond. Suddenly, a possibility becomes something harder to ignore. In 2018, nearly 40 years after Emily stepped out of that diner and into the dark, the cold case unit asks an old question in a new way. Is this our guy? They don't know yet that they're about to put his name on a press release. They don't know yet that they'll stand at a podium and say the words everyone has been waiting to hear. Seattle, 1979, cold case solved. They also don't know that what they call solved will feel to some like a door closing on a room that is still full of shadows. Not yet. Right now, they just know one thing. After decades of silence, the case is finally talking back. The knock on the door of a small, weather-beaten house in coastal Oregon comes on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The ocean air smells of salt and mildew. Wind rattles loose shingles and carries faint gull cries. Inside, the TV is on volume low, some daytime talk show arguing about other people's lives. Raymond Cole answers in a faded t-shirt and worn jeans. 60-something. Thinning hair, eyes that have watched too many tides roll in and take their secrets with them. He looks like someone's uncle, someone's neighbor, someone who knows how to fix a leaky pipe and keep his head down. Detective Sarah Lynn knows better than to trust appearances. She flashes her badge. Her partner does the same. They say Seattle Police and watch his face. For a fraction of a second, something flickers there, a tiny contraction around the eyes, a tightening in the jaw. Then it's gone, replaced with confusion, annoyance, the usual cocktail people wear when cops show up at their front door uninvited. We're following up on an old case, Sarah says. Her voice is steady. She's practiced this. From 1979 in Seattle. She sees it again. The flicker. This time it lasts longer. They talk in the doorway first. He says he hasn't lived in Seattle for a long time. That he barely remembers those years. That he worked hard, kept to himself, never had trouble with the law except a few dumb things when I was young. Sarah asks if they can come in. He hesitates, then steps aside. The house is small, neat in a way that suggests routine more than care. A recliner facing the TV, a coffee table with ring marks from uncoastered mugs, family photos on the walls but fewer than you'd expect, a couple of kids, grown now, lives of their own, a woman in an old picture who might be an ex-wife, might be something else. The details don't matter yet. The air is thick with something unspoken. She asks about the docs, the job, the years he lived in Seattle. He answers in short phrases. Yeah, I worked nights. Yeah, it was rough sometimes. No, I don't remember anything like that. Anything like what? She asks. He realizes he stepped too close to the line. He backtracks. I mean, what you're talking about. I don't know what this is. Why you're here. She says the name. Emily Carter. He flinches. It's small, but it's real. He says he's never heard of her. Then, a beat too late, adds, I might have. It was a long time ago. There were a lot of stories back then. The conversation is recorded. Every denial, every hesitation, every slip. Some of it will later be played for the Carters. Some of it will leak in summary to the press. All of it will be dissected by people who weren't in that room, who didn't feel the atmosphere change when the past walked in and sat down between them on that sagging sofa. They don't arrest him. Not yet. They don't have enough. But they leave with something almost as valuable, his trash. A discarded coffee cup, a napkin, a cigarette butt in the ashtray on the porch. All the things people throw away without thinking, never considering that their bodies are writing in invisible ink on everything they touch. Sarah sends the samples to the lab with a single instruction. Compare this to the unknown profile from 1979. The days between then and the results stretch like wire. When the call finally comes, the lab tech doesn't waste words. It's him, they say. The odds of it being anyone else are astronomical. A match. The same genetic code from the cigarette at the scene, from the hair in the car, now mirrored in a coffee cup tossed into a kitchen trash can 40 years later. Science writes the word across the file in letters only they can see. Connection. The arrest warrant is signed. The team heads back to Oregon. This time, when they knock, there is no small talk. Raymond Cole, Sarah says, badge out, voice colder, you are under arrest for the kidnapping and presumed murder of Emily Carter. The words land like a verdict even before a jury ever hears them. He protests, of course he does, says it's a mistake, says he's never hurt anyone, says this is harassment, says he smoked a lot back then, maybe he was near that car, maybe he bumped into it, maybe any number of things that don't involve abduction and death. I want a lawyer, he says. He gets one. Back in Seattle, the news breaks like a storm front. Seattle 1979 cold case suspect arrested, the graphics scream. Breakthrough in decades-old mystery. Clips of the Carter parents, older now, faces lined with time and grief, are pulled from archives and replayed. New interviews are done, under new harsh lighting, with new microphones held too close. I always believed we'd get here, Mrs. Carter says, eyes wet. I always believed someone would answer for what happened to my daughter. Mr. Carter is quieter, his jaw set. We don't have her back, he says. But maybe we'll know. They don't know yet that even this promise is fragile. Because in the middle of the media frenzy, in the middle of the cautious celebration, something no one planned for happens. Raymond Cole collapses. In a holding cell awaiting transfer, he clutches his chest and drops. Paramedics are called, CPR is performed, machines beep and flash, but hearts that have carried 40 years of secrets sometimes decide their own end. By the time anyone can adjust to the new reality, it's carved into stone. The only man ever officially tied to Emily Carter's disappearance is dead. No trial, no cross-examination, no testimony, no confession. Just a stack of evidence, a DNA match, and a corpse that will never answer another question. The prosecutors make the decision. They move forward anyway. They compile their case as if the trial will happen. They lay out the narrative for the public. They hold a press conference where a spokesperson lists the facts, the match, the timelines, the doc work, the proximity, the statements, the online tip. They tell the cameras that if Cole were alive, they would be moving aggressively to see him convicted. They use a crucial word. Based on the totality of the evidence, the spokesperson says, we consider the Emily Carter case to be closed. For all intents and purposes, this cold case is solved. The headline writes itself. Seattle 1979 cold case solved. Suspect identified after 4 decades. It flashes on local channels, national broadcasts, crime podcasts, social feeds. The story catches fire. People love closure. They love the idea that monsters can be named, even posthumously. They love the arc of long-delayed justice. In the Carter house, there are reporters on the lawn and flowers on the porch. Neighbors stop by with casseroles and champagne. It feels like a funeral and a birthday at once. Something has ended. Something has been born. But late at night, when the cameras leave and the door is locked, when the lights downstairs are off and the house is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, Mrs. Carter sits on the edge of her bed and stares at the darkness. She hears that phone call again. She didn't suffer. She sees that Polaroid, the blurred figure on the pier. She thinks of all the names that ever floated through their lives as suspects, possibilities, whispers. She knows the word everyone is using on TV. Solved. It tastes wrong in her mouth. Because there is still no body, still no confession, still no answer to the question that haunts her more than who did it. What exactly did they do? And why does it feel like the city is in a hurry to write the end on a story that never showed them its final page? The announcement of closure doesn't silence the case, it amplifies it. Podcasts dedicate multi-part episodes to the astonishing resolution of a 40-year-old mystery. Documentaries scramble for interviews. The phrase genetic genealogy is repeated until it starts to sound like magic. In slickly edited montages, Emily's smiling face morphs into Cole's mugshot, as if one were always destined to lead to the other. For many, the narrative is enough. They accept the story as told. A young woman vanished, a predatory dock worker crossed her path, science finally caught up, and justice, though late, has been served in principle. It's clean, it's satisfying, it fits. But not everyone lives comfortably inside neat stories. Detective Sarah Lynn should feel victorious. This is the kind of closure cold case detectives dream of. A headline, a press conference, the gratitude of a family who has waited most of their lives for this moment. Instead, she feels something else. Uneasy. It starts with a box. In cleaning out some of the older shelves, a records clerk finds an unmarked cardboard container pushed behind a row of categorized files. Inside are loose documents, photocopies, and scribbled notes from the early years of the case. Misfiled, misshelved, misplaced. Whatever the reason, they never made it into the main Carter file. Sarah goes through them, piece by piece. There are familiar details, early tip logs, auxiliary witness lists, overlapping with what she already knows. But then there's something new, a report from 1979 she's never seen before. A statement from a young woman who worked at the same diner as Emily, given 3 days after the disappearance. The statement is brief but explosive. She describes a man who used to sit at the counter near closing, nursing coffee, watching the staff too closely. A man who offered rides home, joked about keeping them safe, laughed in a way that made her skin crawl. One night, he waited for Emily outside, leaning against a dark sedan. She turned him down. He looked angry. She reported his license plate to the manager. The manager in turn wrote it down and promised to call the police. The report confirms that both the waitress and the manager spoke to an officer, that a plate number was taken, that some preliminary follow-up was done. The name attached to that plate does not belong to Raymond Cole. It belongs to someone else entirely. Sarah feels the ground shift under her feet. In theory, this is manageable. Multiple suspects exist in most cases. Leads are followed, then discarded. A plate can belong to someone whose only crime was bad timing. But something about the way the report was buried, the way it never merged with the main file, bothers her. She checks other documents in the forgotten box and notices a pattern. Several early leads that point away from Cole's world, not fully explored, not clearly dismissed, just faded out. Interviews cut short, notes without follow-up. A whole branch of the investigation that seems to evaporate without explanation. She looks for Holloway's name, finds it. He signed some of the early pages. His comments in the margins are sharp, underlined words like odd and persistent next to that other suspect's name. Then the notes simply stop. Holloway retired in the late 90s, moved somewhere sunny. He's not easily reachable, but for Sarah, that's a temporary obstacle. She tracks him down, calls, asks for a meeting. He agrees, reluctantly. They sit in a quiet booth in a nearly empty restaurant, decades of one case between them like a third person at the table. "You closed it," he says, after she outlines the DNA match. "Good for you. I always hoped someone would." "Did we?" she asks. He hears the doubt. His eyes sharpen. She shows him copies of the misplaced reports. He squints at them, taps the paper with a finger that shakes just a little. "I remember him," he says, referring to the man with the car at the diner. "We looked at him, hard." "Then what?" she asks. "Then," he trails off, looks out the window. "Then we ran into a wall." "What kind of wall?" He hesitates, takes a breath. When he speaks again, his voice is softer, older. "Internal," he says. "One of our own." The name he gives her belongs to a supervisor, a lieutenant in 1979, now long dead. Someone who took a particular interest in keeping the investigation focused, in not chasing every wild rumor from waitresses who watch too many movies. The implication hangs there. "Are you saying someone in the department steered you away from this guy?" Sarah asks. "I'm saying," Holloway replies, "that every time we tried to push on that lead, paperwork got delayed, approvals got lost, and we were told to redirect our energy. And then other things happened, other cases. The momentum died." "Why?" she presses. He laughs, a short, humorless sound. "Back then, good luck getting a straight answer to a question like that. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the guy had friends in the right places. Maybe someone owed someone a favor. Or maybe the lieutenant just decided he didn't like the look of that angle. It wasn't like now. There weren't checks and balances. There was ego. There was politics. There was the belief that we knew what we were doing, and if we didn't, we'd fake it. It's not the conspiracy theory an online forum would savor. It's something grayer, sloppiness, pride, power used casually in the wrong direction. But in a case like this, small missteps become miles. "Do you think Cole did it?" she asks. Holloway is quiet for a long time. "I think there was always more than one way this could have gone," he says. "You've got DNA. That's more than I ever had. But DNA tells you where someone was, not what they did, not why, and not who else was there." That lands harder than she expects. Because what if the question isn't, did we get the wrong man? What if the question is, did we get only one of them? What if the closed case still has people walking around inside it? The city loves a simple story. It's easier to sleep at night believing in single villains and tidy arcs. But the more Sarah digs, the messier the old narrative becomes. She revisits the waterfront. Not the waterfront of tourists and souvenir stands, but the one underneath, behind, in the cracks, the piers at night, the places where light from the city stops and the water starts, black and depthless. She stands where the Polaroid might have been taken, using the grainy lines of the picture as a guide, matching rails, pilings, and distant glows. She imagines Emily here, 19, tired from a shift, maybe lured, maybe forced, maybe simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. She imagines Cole here too, a dock worker, comfortable on wet wood, knowing the ebb and flow of tides and shifts. If he crossed her path, this would be his home turf. The water would be his accomplice. But she also imagines someone else standing nearby, watching, helping, or just not stopping anything. A second set of footsteps in the dark. The problem is imagination is not evidence. What she does have is data. Phone records, painstakingly digitized from old paper logs, patrol routes, arrest reports from the same weeks, same neighborhoods, a constellation of names and locations that, when plotted, look chaotic. But chaos has patterns if you stare at it long enough. One name keeps reappearing near the edges. The man with the car at the diner. He was stopped twice for minor traffic violations in the months before Emily vanished, within a few miles of the route between the diner and where her car was found. He was questioned once in an unrelated incident at a bar, not charged, just mentioned. His social orbit overlaps with another name in the file, an officer who worked under the pushing lieutenant in 1979. Connections, overlaps, nothing concrete, nothing you could take to court, especially now when people have died, moved, forgotten. Yet the more Sarah sees this web, the less she believes in a single lone predator emerging from the dark like a monster in a neat script. She goes back to the Polaroid, scans it with modern tools, squeezes every pixel for more. A tech enhances contrast, isolates shapes. When they enlarge a corner, something emerges that nobody noticed before. A blur that could be a second person. Not clear, not enough to print on a billboard, but a hint, a shoulder, a arm, a suggestion that Emily, or whoever is in that photo, wasn't alone with just one figure. Again, not proof, but in her bones, the case is starting to feel plural. She brings her concerns to the brass. The response is what you'd expect. We have a solved case, they say. We have a named suspect, we have DNA, we've given the family closure. The public trusts that this is finished. Are you asking us to reopen a wound based on a faint blur in a 40-year-old photo and some half-dead leads? She's not naive. She understands optics. She understands budgets, politics, morale. But she also understands something else, what it means when a city decides it knows the ending to a story and refuses to hear alternate versions. What I'm asking, she replies carefully, is that we acknowledge the possibility that Cole didn't do this alone. That calling the case solved might be premature. They exchange looks, the kind that say, this detective is too invested, the kind that say, we gave you your cold case victory and now you're trying to complicate it. In the end, they compromise. Officially, the case remains closed, with the caveat that investigative leads will continue to be evaluated as they emerge, a phrase that means almost nothing and almost everything, a phrase that lets them keep their press conference while she keeps her conscience. Unofficially, she's told to move her focus. There are other old files, other families waiting. She can't spend the rest of her career chasing ghosts in one story. She nods, agrees, plays the game. But late at night, alone in her office, she still opens the Carter file. She lays out the players. Cole, the man with the car at the diner, the lieutenant who steered things, the officer who orbited both, the anonymous caller, the unknown photographer, the Polaroid. She draws lines in pencil between them. When she's done, the page looks like a constellation. There are stars with names, there are stars without. She stares at it until the lines start to look like bars. Not a cage around a suspect. A cage around the truth. Outside the squad room, the world keeps spinning. Years slide past. The news cycle finds fresher tragedies. Seattle grows shinier, richer, more crowded. People move in, pushing the old neighborhoods to the edges. The street where Emily's car was found is still there, but the storefronts have changed. The diner closed, reopened as something else, then closed again. And yet the case refuses to fully die. Every anniversary, some outlet runs a look-back segment. Sometimes it's a paragraph in an article. Sometimes it's a full TV piece. Always the words cold case and finally solved do the heavy lifting. The narrative hardens. The more it's repeated, the more true it sounds. One year, a reporter reaches out directly to Sarah for a quote. She hesitates. She knows how this works. A single sentence can be sliced, rearranged, weaponized. What do you think, the reporter asks, when you look at the Carter case now after all this time? What she thinks is complicated, what she says is careful. I think we identified a person, she answers, whose DNA places him at a very significant location at a critical moment. I think he likely played a major role in what happened to Emily. And I think that as with many unsolved or partially solved cases, there are still unanswered questions. The reporter doesn't like unanswered questions. It's messy. It doesn't play as well as hero detective finally brings closure. The quote that makes it to air is shorter. We identified a person who likely played a major role, she hears herself say on the broadcast, stripped of context. In the Carter living room, the TV glows. Mrs. Carter listens, lips pressed thin. Mr. Carter stares straight ahead. What do you think? She asks him quietly. I think they picked a villain and decided that's enough, he says. It's his DNA, she replies. Is it his hands, he asks? Is it his voice? Is it his idea? Or was he just the one dumb enough to leave a hair behind when the others didn't? They don't fight about it. There's no energy left for that. They just sit there, two people who lost a daughter in 1979 and in a way never got her back, not even with a headline that said they had. Online, the case develops a second life. There are threads, long and obsessive, where users analyze timelines and maps with the fervor of people who think that if they just stare long enough, the universe will blink. Someone digs up old photos of the docks. Someone else claims to be related to Cole and insists he was a quiet, gentle man who couldn't hurt anyone. Contradictions pile up like snow. A smaller group focuses on the man from the diner reports. They trace his name through property records, old high school yearbooks, archived phone books. They discover he died in the late 90s in another state, under mundane circumstances, no criminal record, no big red flags. But they also find something else, a connection to that 1979 lieutenant, a church they both attended, a charity board they both sat on. It could be coincidence, it could be nothing. Or it could be the faint outline of something uglier, a network of favors and winks, of let's not ruin this man's life over a waitress' nervous feeling, of blind spots shaped like people in the right clothes with the right friends. None of this would stand up in court, but the case isn't in court. It's in the court of memory, of narrative, of the stories cities tell about themselves. And in that court, doubt is a verdict of its own. Every case casts a shadow, some longer than others. For younger officers joining the department now, the Carter file is a piece of institutional lore, a legend told in briefing rooms and during long overnight shifts. The first cold case solved with genetic genealogy, the one that made national news, the one the city points to when it wants to prove that it cares about the forgotten. The nuances, the misplaced box, the steered investigation, the second suspect, the blurred figure in the Polaroid, are mostly absent from the official version. They live instead in the minds of a few detectives, in side conversations, in the uneasy way some old-timers look away when the story is told too cleanly. Sarah is one of those who can't look away. She has other cases now, other families, other names on her walls and in her sleep. But the Carter file is never fully off her desk. Sometimes it's physical, more often it's in her head, looping like a song she can't turn off. One night, late, she finds herself driving without thinking. The city outside her windshield is older, but so is she. She turns down the street where Emily's car was found, parks, kills the engine. For a moment, it's almost easy to imagine the Chevy sitting there again, lights on, door ajar, radio playing some soft AM station. She can picture the yellow tape, the flash of cameras, the rain making halos in the beam of patrol car headlights. Now there is only silence, a few parked cars, a light in an upstairs window, the faint hum of a distant freeway. She gets out, stands under a street lamp, feels the cool air on her face. This is where it started, not for the city. Seattle has been losing and finding people for as long as it's existed, but for Emily's story, for the story that would eventually be condensed into a headline, Seattle 1979 cold case solved. The word hangs in her mind. Solved. She thinks about what that word usually means. An equation balanced. A puzzle with all pieces in place, a question answered, a door closed with a satisfying click. Then she thinks about this case. A girl who left work and never came home. A car that stopped and waited. A photo with a blurred figure near dark water. A phone call that said she didn't suffer and could have been comfort or cruelty. A man whose DNA says he was there. Other men whose names brush up against the edges of the file and then drop off, like cliffs into fog. Is that solved? Is that closure? Or is it simply the point at which the living decide they can't carry the weight of not knowing anymore and put it down wherever they happen to be? She closes her eyes, tries to imagine what really happened between the diner and this spot, how long it took, how much fear there was, how many chances for someone, anyone, to intervene. The brain fills silence with pictures. She sees hands on a steering wheel, a voice offering a ride, a shortcut, a kindness, a moment of hesitation, a nod, a door closing, an engine shifting gears, a turn taken that wasn't the usual one. Then nothing. She opens her eyes. The street is still empty. Some crimes are loud. They leave trails of broken things and shattered lives that everyone can see. Others are quiet. They happen in the span of a few minutes on a wet road, and the noise they make echoes only in the places they leave behind. A kitchen table, a bedroom, a box of cold case files. Emily's story is both. Loud, in the way it has been told and retold, sensationalized, packaged as a victory for modern forensics. Quiet, in the spaces between what we think we know and what we can never prove. So the question remains, after all the headlines have dimmed and the documentaries have rolled their credits, what does it mean for a cold case to be solved? Is it a name? The late posthumous branding of a man as a killer when he can't respond, can't explain, can't apologize, can't boast. Is it science? A sequence of genetic code that says unmistakably this person was present, while remaining stubbornly silent about intent, about fear, about the exact moment when a choice turned into a crime. Is it narrative? The satisfaction of a story that begins with a girl in a car and ends with a press conference decades later, neatly tying the bow around an ache too old to scream. Or is it something simpler and heavier? The point at which the people left behind decide they have heard enough to live with, and the institution decides it has done enough to move on. In the official history, the Carter case is resolved. It sits in databases as cleared. It is cited at conferences as a success story for genetic genealogy. It appears in criminology lectures as an example of perseverance. The words on the slide are clean. Seattle 1979 cold case solved. But talk to the people at the edges and the shine dulls. Talk to the mother who still wakes up from dreams where the phone is ringing and it's Emily's voice on the other end saying she's sorry she's late. Talk to the father who still reroutes his errands to avoid the waterfront because the smell of salt and diesel makes his stomach turn. Talk to the retired detective who remembers being told to look away from one suspect and toward another and wonders which part of that was instinct and which part was politics. Talk to the current detective who reads misfiled reports and enhancement scans and thinks, there is a whole version of this story we never heard. Talk to the city itself if you know how. It speaks in quiet ways, in the older neighbor who still remembers the week they all checked their locks twice, in the waitress who was a kid back then and learned from Emily's disappearance that you never walk alone to your car after a late shift, in the parents who grew up with the story and tell their own daughters, text me when you get where you're going, always. A solved case doesn't erase these things. It doesn't rewind the fear or the lessons or the ways people learn to be smaller in their own streets. It just gives them a line to point to when they need to believe some kind of order exists. A name, a method, a closing statement. Somewhere, in a file room, the Carter box sits on a shelf. Inside, the Polaroid still fades. The paper of the phone transcript still yellows. The ink of She Didn't Suffer growing weaker, but never disappearing. The DNA profile exists now, not as gel bands on a lab image, but as encrypted data in secure systems, a code that will outlive everyone connected to it. Some nights, officers walk past those shelves and feel a chill. Not because of ghosts, but because of all the stories inside those boxes that never got even as much as Emily's did. No suspect, no science, no press conference, just question marks. In that context, solved is a luxury. But the truth is this, for Emily Carter, there is no camera that went back in time to capture the exact moment everything went wrong. There is no final scene with perfect clarity. There is only rain on asphalt, a car left running, a girl who should have made it home and didn't, and a chain of decisions, some cruel, some careless, some merely human, that turned one night into an echo that lasted 40 years. The city tells itself that echo has finally ended, that the name they have is enough, that the headline is correct. Yet in the quiet minutes, when screens go dark and streets empty out, when someone drives past that old stretch of road or stands by the water and stares into the black ripples, a different feeling stirs. Not closure. Not quite. Something like a question mark stretched across decades. Something like a voice, very small, asking, if this is what solved looks like, what does unsolved even mean? Seattle keeps its secrets. The docks still breathe in the dark. The rain still falls on empty streets and occupied ones alike. Life goes on, as it always does, stepping over the outlines of stories it doesn't fully know. And somewhere in the stacks, in a box marked with a name and a year that refused to be forgotten, the case waits. Not for an ending, the world has already written one for it, but for someone, someday, to open it again and see not triumph, not failure, but the thing that haunts every cold case. A mystery that was never really solved, only declared so. There is a strange thing that happens to stories once they have an ending. People stop asking if that ending is true. They start asking how to retell it better. Years after the press conference, after the Seattle 1979 cold case solved headline burned bright and then cooled into archive footage, the Carter case finds a new kind of life in a place nobody in 1979 could have imagined. A server farm, humming somewhere far away, filled with more data than entire cities used to hold. A tech company launches a pilot program with law enforcement, pattern analysis, historical clustering, machine learning models, trained on thousands of cases. The program wants to see if an algorithm can spot what human eyes missed, find links between crimes separated by miles and decades. The pitch is glossy. The words innovation, closure, and justice are used a lot. Seattle signs on, carefully, quietly. The Carter file is fed in with dozens of others, digitized reports, scanned photos, timeline entries, DNA metadata, geolocation tags. Every detail that can be turned into a number, a point, a vector is stripped of its drama and poured into the machine. For the program, Emily is a data set. The system doesn't know about her camera or her dreams or the way her mother still keeps an extra plate in the cupboard as if one day they might need it. It knows coordinates, timestamps, associations. It knows that on one night in 1979, at a specific place on a specific street, something that should not have happened did. Weeks later, a report pings back to the cold case unit, anomaly detected, potential cluster. The algorithm doesn't care about headlines. It doesn't know the word solved. It just sees proximity. It flags several incidents from the late 70s and early 80s, late-night approaches to women near transit stops, unreported in the press, buried in old call logs. A near abduction that ended when a passerby appeared, a woman who fought her way out of a car and refused to press charges, afraid of retaliation. A missing person who turned up 2 days later, bruised and silent, insisting she'd just needed time away. All within a radius, all within a few years. All involving men driving older sedans, offering rides, using similar lines. I'll get you home safe. You shouldn't be out alone this late. None of those men were named Cole. One name surfaces more than once. A repeat on incident reports. A man questioned, warned, written up, but never booked on anything major. The same name that sat on those misfiled papers in the cardboard box. The man from the diner's parking lot. The one with the dark sedan. The algorithm doesn't know his place in the mythology. It just marks him as a node with many lines pointing in and out. The report lands on a desk, not Sarah's. She's at a conference across the country talking about another case. Instead, a younger detective finds it. Someone who grew up with the Carter story as background noise. A legendary cold case cracked by DNA, a badge of honor for the department. He skims the report, frowns. The conflict between narratives is immediate and uncomfortable. The system is, in essence, suggesting something everyone tried not to say out loud. This doesn't look like the work of only one man. He flags it, sends it to Sarah with a brief note. Thought you'd want to see this. When she opens the file, miles away in a hotel room with thin walls and a humming air conditioner, the feeling that hits her is not surprise. It's recognition. The quiet voice in the back of her mind, the one she tried to mute under other work, is suddenly loud again. You were right not to let this go. She scrolls through the findings, dates, locations, police narratives, patterns, drawn not by instinct this time, but by code. What do you do, she wonders, when the future looks at the past and says, your comforting story is statistically unlikely? She flies back, calls a meeting, lays it all out in a conference room where the walls have heard too many versions of the truth. The system is only as good as the data we feed it, one supervisor says, defensive. We know that. Sure, she replies, but we fed it everything, including things we didn't see clearly at the time. She points to the screen, to the cluster of incidents, to the name that keeps popping up. We've been telling this case as a straight line from Emily to Cole. What if it's not a line? What if it's a net? There's resistance. Of course there is. Not all of it malicious. Some of it is pure fatigue. The department went on camera, told the city the case was solved. The family stood in front of microphones and thanked them. The headline is printed. The story has been exported to podcasts, streaming services, true crime books. Changing the script now isn't just inconvenient, it's destabilizing. Are you saying he's innocent? Someone asks, sharp. I'm saying, she answers, that guilt might be more crowded than we thought, and that if this man, she taps the other suspect's name, was operating in the same hunting ground, with the same methods, at the same time, and we have multiple victims who crossed paths with him, maybe calling this solved was more about our need to stop asking questions than about actually finishing the investigation. Silence, the kind that means everyone is thinking, not everyone is agreeing. Bureaucracies don't like ghosts. They like numbers. They like boxes checked. A compromise is reached again. No public reversal, no dramatic announcement that the case is unsolved after all. That would ignite chaos, lawsuits, endless scrutiny, but internally, the net widens. A small, unofficial working group is allowed to look at those flagged incidents, to re-examine the man behind the dark sedan with fresh eyes, to see how deep his shadow really goes. They knock on old doors. They find women now in their 50s and 60s who remember nights they've spent their lives trying not to think about. In living rooms and kitchens, in break rooms and back porches, stories come out in fragments. He followed me. He knew my schedule. He said my name, and I don't know how he knew it. He grabbed my wrist. He smiled like we were just having a normal conversation. Some of them filed reports back then. Some didn't. Some tried and felt dismissed. Some were told to be more careful, as if the danger had been their carelessness, not someone else's choice. It is impossible now to turn these stories into charges, statutes of limitation, dead witnesses, faded memory, defense lawyers waiting with a dozen different ways to dismantle the narrative in front of a jury. But for Sarah, they do something else. They redraw the map in her head. The night Emily disappeared, the city held more than one predator, one whose DNA ended up in a car, one whose name ended up on misfiled reports, maybe others they never saw at all. The certainty the headline promised, that satisfying slam of "we got him," crumbles into something more like a mosaic, pieces missing forever. In the Carter house, no one tells them this in so many words, not immediately. There's a quiet, paternalistic instinct in the department to protect them from further ambiguity. Why stir the ashes? Why disrupt whatever fragile piece they've built on top of the official resolution? But truth has a way of leaking. A journalist, chasing a different angle on the algorithm program, catches wind of the internal report. She makes calls, connects dots. She doesn't get the case files, but she gets enough to write an article with a headline that feels like an echo of the old one, flipped on its head. Seattle, 1979 cold case solved. But was it the whole story? The piece is careful. It doesn't accuse the department of wrongdoing. It doesn't declare anyone wrongly blamed. It asks questions. It quotes unnamed sources who talk about additional persons of interest and parallel offenders. It mentions that the man identified by DNA died before he could face trial, that the word alleged never got the workout it should have. It lands on the Carters' doorstep in the form of a Sunday paper, thick, heavy, smelling of ink. They read it in silence. When they're done, Mrs. Carter's eyes are dry. There are no tears left for this particular twist. "So," she says, folding the paper carefully along its creases, "now we have a solved case that might not be completely solved, and a not solved part that nobody is going to jail for." Mr. Carter looks in the window. Outside, a neighbor's kid rides a bike in looping circles on the sidewalk. "Do you wish they hadn't told us?" she asks. He thinks about it, about the years of nothing, about the surge of relief when Cole's name was announced, about the way even that relief had a hollow spot in the middle, about this new layer of maybe, laid on top of everything else. "No," he says finally. "I don't wish that." "What do you wish then?" she asks. "I wish," he answers, "they'd stop calling it solved like that word means what they think it does." The story doesn't end with an arrest. It doesn't end with a confession in a gray interview room, or with a jury foreman reading guilty in a packed court, or with a neat fade-out shot of parents visiting a grave with fresh flowers. It ends, if you can call it that, with a family who knows more and less than they ever wanted, with a department that has to live with the fact that some of its proudest victories come with footnotes, with a city that continues to walk past places where terrible things happened, unaware, unburdened, or simply unable to carry one more ghost, and with a line of text still sitting in old articles and cached pages and documentary blurbs, stubbornly unchanged. Seattle 1979 cold case solved. It's not entirely wrong. A man who almost certainly took part in what happened to Emily has been named. Science did what it was supposed to do. The dead are not blameless just because they can't answer back. But it's not entirely right either. In the end, maybe that's the truth that lives between the rain-soaked street where her car was found and the waterfront where a blurred figure once stood in a Polaroid no one can definitively explain. Some cases are solved enough to stop the official clock. None are solved enough to rewind it. Some names get written in ink, others fade in pencil along the margins. Some questions get answered loudly, others whisper forever at the edge of what we can prove. And somewhere in that space, in the distance between a headline and a life, Emily Carter still exists. Not as a victim on a case file, not as a symbol of forensic triumph, but as a 19-year-old who should have made it home, who was failed by the stranger who took her, by the systems that missed him, and by a city that decided one day that solved was close enough. Close enough for comfort. Never close enough for truth. Years pass, the headline doesn't. It lives a second life now, cut, clipped, re-rendered in thumbnails and overlays. White text on a dark background, a grainy photo of Emily, a mugshot of Cole, a skyline of Seattle drenched in artificial blue and red, a title slapped across the top like a verdict. Seattle 1979 cold case solved. Clickbait, some people call it, hook, others say. But underneath the graphics, under the dramatic music and the cinematic fonts, there is a real story that never quite sits still. It shifts each time someone new tells it, each time a narrator leans in and says, "Tonight, we're going back to a rainy night in 1979. One night, a content creator sits alone in front of a laptop, headphones on, room dim, audio software open, timeline empty, cursor blinking, a script on the desk printed out covered in notes. On top of it, circled in red, the working title, Seattle 1979 cold case solved. But what did we really solve? They've spent weeks on research, public records, old articles, FOIA requests, interviews with anyone willing to talk. They've read the official version and all its shadows. They've scrolled through forums until their eyes burned. They've watched talking heads simplify the story into a neat arc. Girl disappears, killer found, science wins, the end. But they've also seen the gaps. The misfiled box, the man in the dark sedan, the lieutenant who nudged the investigation, the algorithm that whispered, there was more than one hunter in this city. The cursor waits. Then the voice begins. It's calm, low, controlled, the kind of voice you trust to guide you through something uncomfortable, the kind of voice that pulls you in like a secret. Seattle, 1979. A 19-year-old girl leaves her shift at a diner and vanishes. Her car is found idling on a quiet street, the keys in the ignition, the radio still playing, no broken glass, no blood, just an open door and a missing driver. As the words spill out, you can almost see it all over again. The rain, the pale blue Chevy, the yellow tape, the detective with too much coffee and not enough answers. You're not really there, but the story lets you pretend you are. It lets you stand on that sidewalk and feel the hairs on your arms rise. The narrator keeps going. They talk about the phone call. She didn't suffer. About the Polaroid, a blurred figure on a waterfront, a cruel maybe mailed to a family already drowning in uncertainty. About years turning into decades. About a boxed-up file that refused to disappear. Then the pivot. Fast forward nearly 40 years, the voice says. A new detective, new technology, DNA pulled from an old cigarette butt and a single hair goes into a machine and comes out with a name, Raymond Cole. On the screen, if you're watching instead of just listening, the timeline snaps forward. Archival photos give way to digital graphics. Old case notes become sleek animations. The past suddenly looks sharper, more high definition, because someone has decided to retell it with better cameras. The voice doesn't stop. They knock on his door in Oregon. They take his trash. They run his DNA. And this time, the odds are clear. The same genetic code that sat, sleeping, on evidence from 1979 is now on a coffee cup in his kitchen. The match is beyond reasonable doubt. You hear the arrest, the phrase presumed murder, the collapse in the holding cell, the sudden heart attack, the suspect dead before he can ever sit in a witness box. And so, the narrator says, without a trial, without a confession, but with a powerful scientific link, the city makes a decision. They say, this is our man, this is what happened, this case is solved. A beat of silence. But is that the truth, or is it just enough of one? The music dips, the tone changes, the script shifts from retelling to interrogation. Because that's the thing about stories like this. Once they're on tape, once they're packaged and uploaded, they don't just describe reality, they start to compete with it. The voiceover walks you through the cracks. Buried in the archives, it says, a forgotten box. Inside, notes from 1979 that never merged with the main file. A waitress who said a man waited for Emily in the parking lot. A license plate written down. A report filed. A name attached that didn't belong to the man whose DNA we now have. On the screen, the words misfiled lead flash for a second, then vanish under a flurry of scanned paperwork. A face you never saw before, just a composite, a placeholder, appears next to Cole's. Multiple women, the voice continues, cornered or followed by a driver in a dark sedan. Same era, same neighborhoods, same lines. He grabs a wrist here, blocks a doorway there. One woman escapes when someone else walks by. Another goes home and never reports it, convinced no one will care. You start to feel something claw at the edges of your certainty. That headline you saw earlier, bold and clean, suddenly looks fragile. Underneath the words, case solved, there's a shadow in smaller font. Or maybe not. The video overlays a map. Dots appear, each one an incident, a near miss, a report half lost in time. They cluster around routes young women took home, around transit stops, around that diner, around the street where Emily's car was found. The algorithm, the narrator says, doesn't know about headlines. It doesn't care about press conferences. All it sees is pattern. And in this pattern, one name appears over and over, and it's not Cole's. This isn't an exoneration. It's not an accusation either, not in the legal sense. The man from the diner reports is dead. The lieutenant who steered things is gone. The people who might have known why decisions were made the way they were can no longer answer questions. But the questions remain. If Cole's DNA puts him at the car, does that mean he planned the abduction, or did he join in or come later or clean up or simply cross paths with something already in motion? How many hands touched that car? How many voices spoke to Emily that night? Is the story of a single predator an honest simplification or a convenient one? The narrator doesn't give you a solution, they give you weight. They play a clip of an interview with a woman whose face is blurred, voice distorted. She talks about the night in 1980 when a man in a sedan tried to talk her into his car after her late shift. The way he knew the street she lived on, even though she'd never told him. The way his complimentary tone never matched the look in his eyes. I always wondered, she says, what would have happened if my coworker hadn't come out right then, if I'd been alone, if I'd said yes. I saw that story about the girl from the diner years later and thought, that could have been me. The video cuts back to the narrator. We like our monsters obvious, they say. Lone wolves, strangers in the dark. But sometimes the scariest thing is realizing that, for years, a predator can live right in the middle of a city, drinking coffee, flashing a polite smile, learning the schedules of the people who serve him, and almost nobody stops him until it's too late. The story circles back, as stories do. Back to the Carters, old now, fragile, sitting in a living room where the television is both window and wall. They are asked, on camera, what they think about this new wave of doubt, these suggestions that maybe the case they were told was solved is still hiding something. Mrs. Carter looks at the camera, and you can see every year since 1979 in her eyes. They're doing what they can, she says. The old detectives, the new ones, the kids on the internet connecting things, the people making shows like this. Everyone is trying. Is it enough? The interviewer asks gently. Enough for what? She replies. To bring her back? No. To make sense of it? No. To make sure it never happens to anyone else? I don't know. Maybe. What about the word solved? The interviewer presses. Do you still use that word about your daughter's case? She considers it. I use it when I need to sleep, she says. When I need to believe there's a world where someone answered for what they did. Other nights I don't use any word at all. I just miss her. The narrator doesn't wrap this up with an easy lesson. They don't tell you to feel triumphant about DNA or outraged about missteps or purely afraid of the dark. Instead, they leave you in the tension where the real case lives. Because in the end, this isn't just about one girl in one city in 1 year. It's about what we do with not knowing. You can close the tab, turn off the screen, let the video's last frame vanish with a flick of your thumb, go make coffee, scroll to something lighter, tell yourself that at least in some official file somewhere it says cleared. That has to mean something. Or you can sit there for a moment longer listening to the faint hiss at the end of the audio and admit the quiet truth the story has been whispering to you since that first image of the empty car. Sometimes solved is just the label we put on a mystery when we're tired of being afraid of it. The voiceover ends with the line that sold the video, the line in the title that brought you here in the first place, turned inside out. Seattle 1979 cold case solved, the narrator says one last time, then adds, softer, almost like a confession. But every time it rains on that street, every time someone parks under that same lamppost and leaves their engine running for just a second too long, the city remembers that some answers are only half answers, and some stories never really let go. The music fades, the screen darkens. Out there, beyond your walls, somewhere far from your screen, the street where Emily's car once idled is still just a street. People park there, people walk their dogs, people check their phones under the same kind of drizzle that fell in 1979. Most of them don't know what happened there. A few of them do. And whether they say it out loud or not, whether they believe the headline or carry the doubt, they all live with the same unspoken, unsettling reality. You can declare a case solved, but you can't make the past stop asking questions. The video goes live on a Thursday night. The algorithm does what algorithms do. It nudges, recommends, autoplays. Thumbnails of Emily's face and the Seattle skyline slide into people's feeds between makeup tutorials and cooking hacks and prank compilations. Someone clicks out of boredom. Someone else clicks out of morbid curiosity. Someone lets it play in the background while they scroll their phone. And in a small apartment north of the city, a woman clicks because the thumbnail looks uncomfortably familiar. Her name is Lily. She is 26. She works as a barista in the morning and a freelance graphic designer at night. She was born long after 1979, long after the first posters with Emily's face were stapled to telephone poles, long after the yellow tape came down, long after the Polaroid and the phone call in the first wave of panic. But she has seen that face before, on her grandmother's fridge, on framed photos in a hallway no one walks down after dark, on a folded clipping, yellowed and fragile, that her father keeps in a drawer he thinks she doesn't know about. Because Emily Carter, the girl in the car, the girl in the headline, the girl the city calls a cold case, is not just a story to Lily. She's blood. Her aunt. The one no one talks about for long, the one whose name changes the air in the room. Lily knew Emily's face before she knew what the word murder meant, before she knew what missing really was. Growing up, she knew there was someone missing from family gatherings, someone whose chair at the table stayed in empty space even when cousins were born and chairs were added. She learned the outline of the story in pieces, overheard whispers, half-finished sentences, the way her father's voice went thin when someone on TV mentioned cold cases. She learned the official version, the solved one, the one with the name Cole, but she never learned how to stop wondering about the parts nobody seemed able to explain. When she sees the video title, Seattle 1979 Cold Case Solved, but what did we really solve? Her stomach drops. For a second, she thinks it's some tasteless remake, someone piling onto the old story for clicks. Then she clicks anyway. The voice arrives, calm and cinematic, narrating a night she's been haunted by since childhood. The car, the rain, the door, her aunt's name, spoken by a stranger and sent echoing through her tiny apartment. She watches the whole thing. Every detail she knows, every detail she doesn't. The misfiled box, the man in the sedan, the lieutenant who steered things, the algorithm that doesn't care about closure. She hears her grandparents' words, recorded recently, talking about sleep and the word solved and what it feels like to live under the weight of maybe. She hadn't known they agreed to that interview. No one told her. Seeing their faces on a screen jolts her more than anything else. The video ends. The screen asks if she wants to watch something else. She doesn't. She just sits there. Because for the first time, the story she's grown up inside of is being held up in front of her like a mirror, and she's seeing angles that were always there but never lit. Her phone buzzes, a message from her father. Saw the video? She stares at the text, types. Yeah. You? Yeah. A pause. The typing dots appear, disappear, appear again. Come over tomorrow, he writes. Okay, she replies. She doesn't sleep much that night. The narrator's voice lingers. The map with the little dots, the idea of more than one predator stalking those streets, of a case that's solved enough for some people, but not for her. She thinks about the way people talk about her aunt now. In the true crime forums, in comment sections, in videos like this, like she belongs to the story more than she ever belonged to them. Poor girl. Wrong place, wrong time. Such a tragedy. DNA is amazing, right? She scrolls through the comments under the video. Some are kind, some are thoughtful, some are vile, people speculating about last moments like they're designing a horror movie. Someone writes, if this had happened in 2023, they would have had him in a week. Someone else replies, or they would have found his DNA and still missed his friends. She shuts her laptop. The next day, she drives to her parents' house, the same house her father grew up in, the same one where the phone rang in 1979 and never stopped ringing for months, the same one where reporters stood on the lawn with cameras as her grandparents aged and fast-forward. The neighborhood looks smaller to her now, the trees taller, the houses closer together. She parks at the curb, staring at the front door for a moment like it's the entrance to a story she thought she knew. Inside, the house smells like coffee and old wood. Family pictures line the walls. Her parents are in the kitchen, mugs in hand, the newspaper folded on the table. The headline isn't about Emily, not today. It's politics, economics, something banal. The article about the video is online only, living on servers and screens instead of in ink. Her father looks tired, older than he did last time she saw him, and that was only last week. Her mother squeezes her hand, eyes soft, watchful. So, he says, you watched it. Yeah, she says. You? Your mother and I watched it last night, he replies. Your grandparents did the interview. We found out the same way you did, more or less. They didn't tell you? She asks. They didn't want to make a big thing of it, her mother says quietly. They thought maybe it would just come and go, like the others. But this doesn't feel like the others to Lily. This feels like someone finally saying out loud the things that made her restless whenever anyone used the word solve too easily. She sits. The chair creaks a little. The table between them is scratched from years of dinners and homework and late-night coffee. What do you think? She asks. Her father looks at the surface of his coffee as if there's an answer in the swirl. I think, he says slowly, that it's hard to hear people talk about your sister like a story, like she's a plot twist. But I also think maybe it's good that someone's telling the whole thing, or trying to. He glances up at her. What do you think? He asks. She swallows. I think, she says, that I've lived my whole life being told this case was solved, that a guy with a name and a face did it, and that's something. But now I know there might have been more. Other people, other chances to stop it. I don't know what to do with that. Welcome, he says, tired smile curling one corner of his mouth, to the last 46 years of our lives. They talk for a while. About the missteps, the lieutenant, the man in the sedan, the algorithm, the idea that multiple people might have been involved. Her mother asks questions Lily can't answer. Her father fills in gaps where he can, from the family's end of the timeline. At one point, her mother leaves the room and comes back with a shoebox. Lily recognizes it. It's the same one she tried to sneak into when she was 14 and curious, and her father caught her, snapping it shut with a sharp, "Not yet." Now he nods. It's time, he says. Inside, clippings, Polaroids, a copy of the camera Emily used to carry, the strap cracked, old missing posters, the photo of Emily that ended up everywhere, black and white, smiling, the printed summary of the DNA breakthrough from years ago, when they first heard Cole's name, a pamphlet from one of the true crime conferences where a detective once spoke about the case, and at the bottom an envelope. The Polaroid. Lily has seen a scanned version before, in articles and videos. But never the real thing, never the actual piece of film that sat on this table in 1979 and made her grandmother's hands shake. Her father slides it toward her. Up close, it's even grainier. The waterfront, the railing, the smear of lights in the distance, the blurred figure, small, caught mid-motion, the faint suggestion of another shape near the edge that might be a person or just the ghost of a bad exposure. Do you think it's her? Lily asks quietly. Her father's jaw tightens. I used to say yes, he says. Then I told myself no, because it was easier to think it was some sick joke than proof she was out there walking under someone else's control. Then I went back to yes, then I stopped asking. And now, she presses gently. He shakes his head. Now I think it doesn't matter as much as we thought it did, he says. Whether it's her or not, someone wanted us to believe it. Someone took that picture, someone put it in our mailbox, that guy with the van, or the one from the diner parking lot, or one of their friends, or the one with the DNA, or all of them. We've spent years trying to turn this into a clean line. I don't think it's a line, I think it's a knot. Lily studies the Polaroid, her own reflection ghosts in the glossy surface. For a moment, it looks like there are 3 figures instead of 2. She feels a sudden, irrational urge to go there, to stand where that photo was taken, to match the angles, the light, the distance, to put her feet where her aunt's feet might have been. Has anyone ever gone back to that spot? She asks. Detectives have, her father says. Reporters, people making shows. I never went. Why? She asks. He looks at her like the answer is obvious, then softens. Because if I stood there, he says, I'd have to admit that no matter how many times I replay it in my head, I will never know what happened between that pier and that car. And if I admit that, I don't know what's left. Lily hears herself speak before she's fully decided. I want to go, she says. Her mother tenses. Lily, I'm not going alone, Lily adds quickly. I just, if the whole city loves this story so much, if they keep retelling it like it's theirs, I want to see the actual place with my own eyes. Not just through a screen, not just through someone else's words. Silence stretches. The refrigerator hums. Outside a car passes, tires hissing on pavement. I'll take you, her father says. Her mother starts to protest, then stops, looks at him, looks at their daughter. Okay, she says quietly. Okay. They go that weekend. It's not an anniversary, not a date anyone else would mark. It's just a day that happens to be free in 3 intersecting lives that have all been organized for decades around the absence of one person. They drive into the city. Downtown hums. People cross streets with coffees and headphones and small dogs. Tourists aim phones at landmarks. Homeless tents cluster under overpasses. The waterfront beckons with ferries and fish markets and the smell of salt and fried food. They don't go to the postcard spots. Her father knows the way, even though he pretended not to care about the specifics for years. The pier from the Polaroid is quieter, more industrial, less polished. There are signs about access, warnings, security cameras that didn't exist in 1979. Some parts are fenced off, others are open. They park and walk. The wood under their shoes creaks. Gulls circle overhead. The water slaps against pilings in slow, heavy rhythms. The air is colder here, the wind sharper. Here, her father says, stopping near a section of railing. How do you know, she asks. Lines, he says, pointing. That building, those lights. They match what's in the background of the photo if you stand just right. One of the detectives showed us once, many years ago. I watched from the car. I couldn't get out. Now he's out. His hand rests on the rail. His eyes are far away. Lily takes out her phone. For a second, she considers lifting it, framing a shot, superimposing her aunt's ghost with a digital lens. She doesn't. Instead, she just stands where that blurred figure stood and looks into the darkness under the waterline. It's daytime, but the depths are still black. This is where they think she might have been, she says. This is where someone wanted us to think she was, her father corrects. There's a difference, and they both feel it. She imagines Emily's shoes on this wood, the weight of her camera on her neck, the way her breath would fog in the cold air, whether she was alone or flanked by men whose names are only half remembered now, whether she knew, standing here, that this was the cliff edge and there was no going back. She feels anger, not the diffuse kind she's carried since childhood, but something sharp and specific. Anger at the men who took her, at the city that lost her, at the systems that stumbled, at the storytellers who turned her into content, at the word solved that hangs over all of it like a sign on a locked door, at herself for not coming here sooner. She turns to her father. Does it feel any different, she asks. He looks out at the water, his shoulders rise and fall. No, he says. Then after a moment, yes, I don't know. It feels real and unreal, like I've been living in someone's reenactment of this place for so long that seeing the actual boards, the actual bolts, the actual rust is like waking up in a set that turns out to be a real house. He laughs once, quietly. There's no humor in it. You know what the worst part is, he says. She waits. I don't know what I expected, he says. Some feeling, some answer, a sign, her voice, something, but it's just a dock, it's just water, it doesn't care. The wind lifts his hair, he grips the rail harder. Lily feels that same hollow, that same lack of revelation. No ghosts rise. No truth wells up from the deep. The city does not apologize. The past does not rewind. She steps closer to him. Maybe that's the point, she says. The story makes this place feel like a symbol. The video, the documentaries, the podcasts, but being here, it's just wood and water. The only thing that makes it anything else is us. The way we remember, the way we refuse to let it be just another place. He turns that over, nods slowly. So what do we do with that, he asks. She doesn't have a clean answer. She doubts there is one. Maybe we stop letting other people have the last word, she says. Maybe we tell it ourselves, not as a puzzle, not as a triumph of technology, just as what it is, a wound that never healed the right way. He looks at her, really looks at her. You want to tell it, he asks. You? She feels the weight of that, the responsibility, the danger of turning her aunt's life and death into a narrative project. I don't know, she says, but I know I'm tired of hearing strangers decide for us what solved means. On the way back, they detour. He drives down the street where the car was found. It looks ordinary, it probably always did. A different mix of shops, a different kind of traffic. But the bones are the same, the curve of the curb, the angle of the lamppost. He pulls over for a moment. The engine idles. The sound is too loud in the quiet. This is where my father stood, he says. That first night, watching them tow the car. This is where my mother realized the world had stopped making sense. This is where they both thought, somehow, they'd wake up tomorrow and she'd be back, and this would all be a mistake. Lily imagines it. The blue Chevy, the tape, the breath of exhaust in the cold air. A 19-year-old who is suddenly not a 19-year-old, but a photo on a wall. She thinks of the video she watched 2 nights ago. The way it ended, with a voice telling thousands of strangers that the case never really let go. She thinks about what it means to grow up inside a story like this. To have both her aunt and the city pull her in different directions, one asking to be remembered, the other asking to be resolved. She takes a breath. Dad, she says. Yeah? What if, she says slowly, we never use the word solved again? Not for her. Not like that. What if we say they found someone, they proved some things, they answered some questions, they left others, we live with it? He considers. The engine hums. The past sits in the passenger seat with them. Okay, he says, we can do that. It won't change the articles already written. It won't change the documentaries already streaming. It won't change the slide in the PowerPoint that some lecturer uses with the words case closed in bold. But it changes something else. Inside this car, on this street, in this family, the word loses its power to flatten everything. They drive home. That night, in her apartment, Lily opens her laptop again. The video's view count has climbed. The comments keep piling up. Conspiracy theories, sympathy, criticism of the police, praise for the detective, arguments about DNA, about responsibility, about the ethics of true crime. She scrolls past them all and opens a new document. The cursor blinks. She types 3 words. She was real. Then she keeps going. Not a script, not a cold case breakdown, not a detective's report. A voice. Not the city's. Hers. The sentence stays on the screen longer than it should. She was real. The cursor blinks after the period, daring her to keep going. The rest of the document is empty. Hundreds of thousands of words have been written about her aunt, by detectives, reporters, bloggers, podcasters, commenters using names that aren't theirs, but none of them started like this. They started with the car, the rain, the word cold. Lily starts with a person. She sits at her small desk, the glow of her laptop the only light in the room. Outside, the city's hum is muted by thin walls and tired insulation. Somewhere, a siren slides past. Somewhere, a train horn echoes. Somewhere, someone is telling another story about another case, and they don't know they're inside one too. She types. She was real, before she was a case, before she was a headline, before she was a cautionary tale you tell your daughters. She laughed too loud at jokes that weren't that funny. She burned grilled cheese because she got distracted talking. She took pictures of everything, including bugs on windowsills and strangers' shoes and reflections in puddles. It feels wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because part of her still hears her father's voice saying, we don't talk about her like that in public. Right? Because if she doesn't, who will? She writes about the way Emily's handwriting looks on the back of old photos. Loopy, confident, the way she wrote soon in letters that never became anything else. The way her camera strap wore a groove into the leather of her bag. The way her mother, Lily's grandmother, still flinches when a phone rings late at night. She doesn't write about Cole yet, or the man in the sedan, or the lieutenant, or DNA. That can come later. For once, they don't get the opening scene. Her phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. This is Detective Lynn. Sarah, your father gave me your contact. He said you might want to talk. Lily stares at the message. She knows who this is. The detective in the documentaries, the one in the video whose quotes were cut down until they sounded simpler than they were. The one who stood on a pier with a folded map and talked about critical locations, while B-roll showed wet wood and dark water. She types back, yeah, I do. They meet in a cafe that isn't trying too hard to be anything. Plain tables, chalkboard menu, steam clouding the front windows. No one here is whispering about cold cases. They're whispering about rent, exams, divorces, football. Sarah is older than Lily expected and younger than the voice in the video sounded. Her hair is threaded with gray in a way that looks earned, not surrendered. She wears plain clothes that don't try to disguise the posture of a cop. They shake hands, sit. There's a moment where both are quiet, like two people on a narrow ledge trying to figure out how to pass without falling. Thanks for meeting me, Lily says. Thanks for reaching out, Sarah replies. I wasn't sure if you'd want anything to do with me. Why, Lily asks. Because I'm part of the machine that told you this was solved, Sarah says simply. And then part of the machine that quietly kept looking at reasons it might not be. There it is, no softening, no PR gloss. Lily almost laughs, not because it's funny, but because it's so rare to hear someone say it that plainly. I watched that video, Lily says. The one that talked about you, about the box, about the other suspect. It made you sound like some kind of tragic hero, the detective who wanted to keep going but was shut down by the system. Sarah snorts. Tragic hero, she repeats. Tell that to my paperwork pile, but yeah, I saw it too. They cut it to make me sound braver than I felt and more certain than I was. That's how you get views, I guess. They drink coffee, they talk. About 1979, as much as either of them knows. About how the case moved, then stalled, then moved again. About how DNA gave them something solid in a world of maybes. About how that solidity got turned into absolutes because absolutes make for better sound bites. Did you want them to say it was solved? Lily asks. Sarah thinks about that. I wanted them to say we identified someone who almost certainly played a major role, she says. I wanted them to say we were closer. I wanted them to say we know more now than we did, but that's not the word they chose. Why didn't you fight it? Lily pushes. Not cruel, just hungry. I did, Sarah says quietly. Just not enough. Not in ways that made the cameras. Some days I tell myself that's because the family needed something clear to hold on to. Some days I think it's because I was tired. You work these cases long enough, you start to crave any door that looks like it might close. Lily nods. She understands tired in a different way, the kind you inherit, not the kind you earn. I'm writing something, she blurts. About her, about all this. I don't want it to be another, she gestures vaguely, encompassing every slick documentary, every breathless voiceover. I want it to be honest. What does honest look like to you? Sarah asks. Messy, Lily says. Not neat. Not pretending we know everything. Not pretending science is magic and systems don't fail and people don't make choices based on ego and convenience. But also not just rage or blame or turning her into an object lesson. Sarah leans back. Then you're already ahead of most of us, she says. Lily hesitates, then takes a breath. Can I ask you things? She says. Not like a reporter, just like someone who has to live with the story you helped shape. You can ask anything you want, Sarah replies. Whether I can answer is another matter. So Lily asks what it felt like to open the file for the first time, what it felt like to get the DNA match, what it felt like when Cole died in lockup, what it felt like to stand in front of cameras and say a version of the truth that wasn't the whole truth, what it felt like when the algorithm report landed on her desk and all the old doubts bloomed again. Sarah answers what she can. She doesn't varnish much. She admits fear. She admits pride. She admits moments where she told herself stories to get through the day. At one point, she says something that sticks. People think solving a cold case is like turning a light on in a dark room, she says. But most of the time, it's like turning on a flashlight with half-dead batteries. You get a circle of clarity, and everything outside it looks even darker by comparison. Lily writes the sentence down as soon as she gets home. She puts it after she was real. She writes for weeks, on her days off, on her lunch breaks, late at night, early in the morning when the world is quiet enough that the past feels closer. She writes about Emily laughing in the kitchen with flour on her jeans, about the car on the street, about the phone call, about the Polaroid, about her grandparents aging in front of a camera that never shows that part, about her father standing on a pier 40 years too late, about Sarah in a fluorescent lit lab waiting for a printout that would change everything and nothing. She writes about Cole, not as a monster in a thumbnail, but as a man, not to humanize him in a redeeming way, but to acknowledge that even monsters pay bills and have neighbors and buy cigarettes. She writes about how easy it is in hindsight to draw a red circle around one face and ignore all the others in the background. She writes about the man in the sedan, whose name she knows now but will never say out loud on a page because he has family too, and she understands too well what it's like to have your last name dragged through someone else's narrative. She writes about the word solved and how it's a comfort in an injury, a bandage slapped over a wound that never stopped bleeding. She does not write like a cop, or a reporter, or a YouTube narrator. She writes like someone standing on a dock and in a living room and on a quiet street all at once. When she's done, if this is what done looks like, she has something. Too long for an article, too personal for a case report, too unpolished for a mainstream documentary. She sends it to Sarah, to her parents, to her grandparents. She expects resistance. She expects someone to say, no, this is ours, keep it here. Instead, something else happens. Her grandfather, who doesn't say much these days, leaves a voicemail. I read it, he says, voice thin but steady. You made her sound like a person again, not, what do they call it, a victim. She was that too, but she was more. Thank you. Her grandmother sends no message, but when Lily visits, there's a printed copy on the coffee table, pages worn at the edges, a mug ring on the margin of one paragraph, proof that someone lingered there long enough for their drink to cool. Her father sits across from her at the kitchen table, the same one where the shoebox once sat, now cleared. You sure you want to put this out there? He asks. Are you asking as my dad? She says. Or as someone who's lived through what happens when strangers claim a story. Both, he says. She thinks of the comments under the video, the theories, the strangers using her aunt's name like a password into a club. I don't want it to go viral, she admits. I just want it to exist somewhere in the stack so that if someone goes looking, they find more than just Seattle 1979 cold case solved and a frozen school photo. They find this, us, what it felt like from in here. Her father nods. Then do it, he says. She doesn't pitch it to big outlets. She doesn't send it to networks. She posts it on a personal site she's never really used. No ads, no thumbnails. Just text on a pale background. Black letters saying hard things. She calls it reluctantly by the title everyone expects because she knows that's how people search. Seattle 1979 cold case solved, a family that still has questions. The quotes around solved are her quiet rebellion. It doesn't explode. It doesn't trend. A few people share it. A few others stumble across it through the same algorithm that shoved the polished video into her feed weeks ago. Some comment, some just read and leave, carrying a slightly heavier version of the story in their heads. One night, another content creator emails her, not the one from the original video, but someone smaller. They ask if they can quote a line in an upcoming episode. People think solving a cold case is like turning a light on in a dark room. She considers saying no. She considers hoarding every sentence. Then she remembers what she told her father on the dock. She doesn't want the last word. She just doesn't want the wrong one to be the only one. She writes back, "You can use it, but say who said it." A few weeks later, she's walking home in a light drizzle, headphones in, when a familiar sentence reaches her, filtered through someone else's microphone. Sarah's line, her own paragraph wrapped around it, read by a voice that doesn't try to sound like a movie trailer. The episode ends with something she didn't expect. The host says, "If you want to know what it feels like to live with a case like this from the inside, I recommend you read Lily Carter's piece. I'm not linking it for clicks. I'm linking it because the city might call this solved, but the people who lost the most never got that luxury." She stops under a street lamp. The rain freckles the sidewalk. For a moment, the world feels very small and very big at the same time. She looks down the street. It's not the one where Emily's car was found, but it could be. Any quiet street at night could be. Any open door. Any idling engine. Any life that hasn't yet had a headline pinned to it. The cold case is still a cold case in the only way that matters. It will always be a night without a full account, a dock without a witness, a city with questions etched into its bones. But now, alongside the lab reports and the press releases and the documentaries and the viral videos, there's something else. A record that says, she was real, this hurt. Solved is not the same as understood. Years from now, someone might pull up the file again. A new detective, a new technology, a new algorithm that sees patterns in patterns. Maybe they'll find something no one else could. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll read her piece before they dig in and feel, for a moment, the weight they are picking up. Maybe they'll walk that street, stand on that pier, feel nothing change and everything shift. Seattle will keep raining. Cars will keep idling. People will keep disappearing and being found and being lost in ways that can't always be measured. But in one family, in one house where a shoebox sits a little less like a bomb and more like an archive, there's a quiet, stubborn insistence that the story doesn't belong only to the word that ended every news segment. It belongs to the girl who never made it home, to the people who waited, to the detective who kept reading, to the niece who wrote she was real and refused to end with case closed. The case is solved. The story isn't. And as long as someone somewhere is willing to tell it that way, the past keeps its right to be complicated, to be painful, to be unfinished. The cold case doesn't warm up, but it stays alive.